Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Minority Pre-Law Conference. My name is Darius Crayton, and I am an attorney here in Birmingham, Alabama at the firm of Farris, Riley, and Pitt. I practice personal injury law. And today we have an awesome panel of legal heavyweights here in Birmingham, Alabama. First up, we have Mr. Denzel Okinedo. He's a lawyer at Burr Forman here in Birmingham. He practices in their financial services litigation practice group. Next up, we have Mr. Derrick Mills. He's a partner at Marsh, Rickard, and Bryant here in Birmingham, Alabama. His practice areas are personal injury, products liability, business litigation, and bad faith. Finally, we have the Honorable Judge Shanta Owens. She's a circuit court judge in the criminal division for the 10th Judicial Circuit of Alabama. How are we doing today, guys?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Doing well. If it's okay with everybody, I figure we can just jump right into the questions. Denzel, the first question's for you, man. Just kind of let us know what you do. Give us your practice areas, what they mean, and just kind of give us a little brief rundown of your day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me on this panel. When you said legal heavyweights, I think you're talking about the other two people on here. I'm trying to take it all in. But I work at a firm called Burr Forman. It's a full service defense firm. So, the way I always explain is, think of Walmart and Target and now make them law firms. If you want your general commercial litigation, if you want your employment law, we've got that. If you want your immigration law, if you want your bankruptcy, we got that. Specifically for me, I work in the financial services litigation group. And so a lot of our clients, they're going to be banks, lenders. They're going to be people who loan money. So they're financiers. And so a lot of the litigation I deal with stems from those transactions. So if someone bought a house and took out a mortgage with a bank, if someone bought a car and took out a loan with some sort of lending company or creditor. And so with that, I have to have a lot of familiarity with federal statutes, state statutes, and a lot of it is just making sure that the clients, the people that we're defending, the bankers, the creditors, the lenders, they're complying with those statutes. And then also the lawsuits that are coming in, they're actually viable, reasonable lawsuits. So what I do every day is essentially respond to these lawsuits. So people like Derrick are filing complaints and they're going after us. And so we're responding to them. But I enjoy it because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, I'm 2-3 years into my practice. And so I'm learning every day. And the great thing is there's a reason they call it the practice of law. From what I hear, whether you're 3 years in or 30 years in, you're always still practicing and trying to improve. And so what my everyday looks like is always just trying to improve. I feel like every day there's something I've never seen before. Sometimes I'll ask questions, but always I'm asking questions. But a lot of the learning that I've done and a lot of the growth that I've experienced has been when I've been thrown in the fire, when people have kind of said, figure it out. And that's what I enjoy, and that's a challenge I enjoy. So every day is a challenge, but I think, if you've made it all the way through law school, there's a reason for it.
All right. Thank you very much, man. Mr. Mills, we'll just go straight to you next, man. Just the same question. What do you do? Give us a little bit about your practice areas and just a brief description of your day-to-day.
All right. So, hey, I agree. Thank you for having us on here. I also agree. I don't know that I consider myself a heavyweight. I'm just sort of doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Really enjoy what I do. I started, like Denzel, on the defense side. I represented companies. And so now, after, I've been practicing now since 2004. So I don't know how long that is now, 17 years, I guess now. So I represent people, the underdog. I represent either people or small businesses when they have a complaint against some big business or against some other party who has wronged them in some way. Normally, it's some sort of injury or death. Sometimes it's some sort of business dispute. But I started out on the defense side. I can't tell you the joy that I get being a small town guy, being a guy who grew up with no means, a guy who grew up with nothing, to represent those same folks that absolutely feel like they don't have a voice. And so I'm their voice. And so I represent all types of people who have been cheated, who have been wronged, who have been hurt by the system. And so anything from medical malpractice to a product liability case to a wrongful death via some sort of personal injury. And I'll tell you a quick story about why I love what I do. So I grew up in Fayette, Alabama, which is the countryest of the countryest of towns in Alabama. And I grew up in a town where race matters. People like to talk about race doesn't matter right now. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's a conversation for another day. But where I grew up, race mattered. And so my first big case that I handled, I showed up at this woman's doorstep because the firm had the case at that point. I showed up at this woman's doorstep in Haleyville, Alabama, which is in Winston County. And if anybody's ever read about the free state of Winston, then you know how the folks look in Winston County. And when I showed up and said, "Hey, I'm your lawyer," the stares I got from everybody in that house, it was a woman and her two sons, was like, "You're our lawyer?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm your lawyer." And so for the next year and a half, I built trust with that family. The grieving widow, and I'll tell you about the case in a minute. I know we don't have much time, but the grieving widow went to every single deposition. And Darius, you do what I do, so you know that's unusual. That doesn't happen. She went to every single deposition that I took. At first, I think it was, I don't really trust this guy. I don't really know if this guy knows what he's doing. After a while, you saw the transition. You saw that she saw, I cared about her. I cared about her fight. I cared about her cause. And she grew. I mean, I'm not speaking, I don't think, too emphatically when I say she grew to love me. And we got a big verdict for her in Winston County. And, when I got that verdict, when that jury came back and said, "You're right, you deserve justice," she gave me the biggest hug, tears down her eyes. And every single year, so we're Facebook friends, every single year she sends me and my kids a Christmas card. She just always checks on me to see how I'm doing. And it was a nursing home case. And Darius, again, I know you know about these kind of cases. They're tough cases. It was a case where her husband was, he had a Foley catheter pulled out of his private part, and he bled to death. And every single person in that nursing home told her she was lying. She made this up. And we put that case together in front of an all-white jury. And that jury believed her. And she didn't care about the money. She cared about somebody having a voice for her, somebody fighting for her, somebody believing her. And so that's why I do what I do. And it's necessary what I do, but it's also very necessary what Denzel does. And so that's why I do what I do. And those are the kind of cases that I handle. I'm a trial lawyer. I put my whole heart and soul in these things, and I'm a country boy. And so hopefully we'll get back to this later. But when you get to the point as a lawyer, as a human, to where you feel like you can take yourself, whoever you are, with your flaws, and present that to somebody else, and present that as a lawyer, that's when I think you are a success. And I think many of the students that are going to be listening to us now are struggling with, whether or not they can make it, whether or not they can be a success. They can look at old country Derrick Mills and they can say, "I can do it too." So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I wanted to lead off with.
I think it did, man.
Right.
And finally, Judge Owens, just same question for you. Just tell us a little bit about what you do and just a brief description of your day-to-day as a judge.
Okay. Again, like everyone else has said, thanks so much for inviting me to be a part of this. And I, as Darius introduced me at the top of the program, I am a circuit court judge in the criminal division of Jefferson County. This is probably, I think, my 13th year of being on the bench, but I've been practicing law since 2002. And what I do every day is I preside over criminal matters where people are charged with felony offenses. And a felony offense is any crime for which a person could receive a year and a day to death for. It is a very exciting job. It is a very serious job. Judicial temperament, meaning the way you treat others and the way you act, is very important. You have to be very knowledgeable about the law. But on a daily basis, I do anything from I will have hearings on cases to determine if evidence should be suppressed. I have maybe just a few bench trials on some issues if the attorneys agree to a bench trial, but more than likely everyone loves a jury trial, in which I do too. I love it when I'm in jury trial. So 99% of the time, what I do is I preside over cases before a jury. And like I said, I handle anything from a theft case to a capital murder case. And capital murder is the only crime in the state of Alabama for which a defendant is eligible for a potential death sentence. This has been a very rewarding career for me. And when I hear Denzel and Derrick talk, and they talk with passion about what they do, we do totally different things. But I think we've each found what makes us happy. Being in the criminal area makes me so happy. Like, I could not imagine waking up every day not being able to go to the criminal courthouse. And Darius was actually a prosecutor in my courtroom when I presided over the drug court program for 10 years before taking the circuit bench. And so Darius can attest. I'm not sure if he enjoyed his time in drug court, but I enjoyed having him there, and I enjoyed going there every day with our thousands of cases a day that we handled on the docket. But one other thing I wanted to tell you. My entire career has been in the criminal justice system. Before taking the bench as a criminal court judge, I was actually a prosecutor with the Jefferson County DA's office here in Birmingham. And so my entire career has been in the area of criminal law. I've found it myself very rewarding. And when I attended law school, when I started attending law school, I did not think that I would practice in the area of criminal law. Not at all. What the turning point for me was the semester after my second year of law school. I clerked with the district attorney's office in Birmingham, and I saw two wonderful lawyers trying a capital murder case. And one of those lawyers went on to become a mentor of mine, and the other was later my supervisor in the DA's office. But I saw them, and at the end of that week, I remembered I came home and I told my mom, I have just found out what I really want to do with my career. And here it is, how many years, what is this, 19 years later, then I am still loving every minute of it.
Wow. And let me just tell you, Judge, I loved every moment of being in drug court with you, so you don't even have to worry about that. All right, guys, I promise you I'm not going to ask every question to each of you, but this next question, I kind of want to get an answer from all of you. When did you decide you wanted to pursue a career in the legal field, and why? Denzel, we'll start with you.
It's always an interesting question, because whenever someone asks me that, I feel like I always pinpoint different points in my life, and so part of me wonders, maybe it was underlying the whole time. But originally, I actually wanted to go to divinity school. My senior year of college, I had actually gotten accepted to divinity school. I was on my way. I was very excited, and my dad made a funny joke. He's like, Denzel, do you want to go into debt over a divinity degree or a law degree? And it was a funny joke, but it was something that kind of I considered, which is honestly something that everyone should consider, when making that decision on whether they want to go to the next step or not. But for me personally, I always look back to a specific moments in my life. Not a lot of people know this about me, but I'm actually an immigrant. I came to the United States when I was very young. I was born in Nigeria, and I became a citizen when I was a freshman in undergrad. And so from as soon as we got off and landed in New York City, to all my time being raised in Alabama, till my freshman year at Birmingham Southern College, we were preparing for the exam, getting ready to become citizen. And, you know, for me, it wasn't that bad because the exam was essentially me taking history class growing up here in Alabama. But for my parents, it was a little bit different. And so seeing them not only navigate and study and grind in their day jobs, and then at night study for that exam, and then prepare for all the different legal processes that was required to become a citizen of the United States, just seeing that, you know, kind of inspired something in me, and inspired a curiosity. And, you know, the legal field, them dealing with immigration attorneys, trying to get all the paperwork and everything corrected. And there was, I'm trying to think of a tact way to say it. There was a way that it kind of felt like they looked helpless because they didn't know how to navigate that path without their attorney. And I saw that their attorney was someone who provided them guidance, someone who they trusted, someone who, for lack of a better term, their life was in the attorney's hands. I mean, the future of what the next 10, 15 years of their lives, my future. And so that was something that really inspired me. In the importance of being an attorney, and kind of like what Derrick mentioned earlier, people trusted him. People look at him as someone that, you know, whether he on a good day or a bad day, it's someone that they believe could advocate for them. And that second part, advocate, was something that I found later on in college. I had the opportunity to work at a nonprofit, and I'll never forget, it was the last day of working on the nonprofit. You know, I was getting ready to go out. I had all my stuff packed up. My family was actually had like a ticket. We were gonna go on family vacation to SeaWorld. I was excited. And I'll never forget, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We close at 5. An elderly lady walks into the nonprofit. And I was in charge of the food bank. So I was the one who was in charge of making sure that, you know, if someone came in and they need something to eat, they got it. And so I told her, ma'am, you know, the food bank closes at 3 o'clock. There's nothing I can really do. And she's like, I'm not here for that. And I'll never forget, she closed the door and she sat down and she just pulled up her arms and she showed me all these bruises and she showed me all these scars. And I mean, at the time I was a younger person in college, and, you know, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to say. And she was like, I don't know who to go to. I don't know what to do. My husband beat me up last night. I don't know what's going on. And I mean, I kid you not, I went to the bathroom and I cried because I didn't know how to take it all in, because, you know, fortunately, I've never had anything like that be a part of my life or my family, but that was reality for some people. And I realized that voice is so important, and so is advocacy. And so regardless, whether it's, you know, personal issues at home or trying to navigate the legal system to attain a certain status, people need advocates. And so even though Derrick and I are on different sides of the V, we ultimately do the same thing. We advocate on behalf of somebody. A lot of his cases may be more grasping at emotions and maybe more challenging when it comes to, you know, dealing with adversity. And the cases I deal with usually deal with money and people just being mad about checks and loans and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if we just sum it all down to an even playing field, we're advocating. And so those experiences really kind of brought out the importance of advocacy, regardless of what the issue is or whatever the matter.
Wow. Great answer, man. Great answer. Mr. Mills, what about you, man? Why did you want to pursue a legal career?
Well, Darius, that's not fair, because you picked on me to follow that answer, and that is a phenomenal answer, and so I'm gonna try to get through it, but my goodness. Anyway, I'll say this. I'll tell you the truth, because I think the folks that's going to listen to this want to know the truth. The truth is, I grew up dirt poor. I mean, dirt poor. We didn't know where we were going to eat most nights. I grew up wanting to get out of Fayette County, to get some sort of job where I could make some money. Everybody in my county that had money were politicians. So I actually wanted to go into politics. I'm not as bubbly and as personable as the judge down here. She knew I was going to say it. And so I quickly realized, even though I majored in political science and English, and I was going into politics. I mean, one of my big mentors was Hal Heflin, who paid my way through college and law school. And I was going into politics. But I met some Judge Owenses in college, and I said, it ain't gonna work. You're not gonna go into politics. And so law and politics are similar. And so because when you major in political science and English, you're not going to do much else. And so I went to law school still thinking there was an outside chance I'd get into politics. But Denzel, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but my motivation was money. I had to make some money. I had to get out of my situation. And so I went to law school for that reason and that reason only. And, I'm not really ashamed of it because I heard from a mentor, Darius, Denzel, Judge Owens. I heard from a mentor this phrase when I was in my third year of college, I think, before law school. All the great leaders. I don't know who started this quote, but the quote is, you learn and then you earn and then you return. And so in politics, which obviously Judge Owens is sort of in, even though she's in the law, but she's still a phenomenal politician. I want her to run for governor. Politics is you're serving, right? You're trying to return what has been given to you. I'd like to think that lawyers do that too. In fact, our phrase is lawyers render service. And so we're serving. And so even though deep down, if I'm being honest, my motivation was money, if you listen to that phrase, you learn and then you earn and then you return. I'm now in a position because I've done well, and I don't apologize for that because I worked hard. I'm now in a position to where I serve on boards, to where I contribute to organizations that matter to me. And so I really don't apologize for the fact that I went into it for money. I went into it to better myself, and now I'm able, because of the career, I'm able to return that favor and to give back. And so I'll shut up there. That's really my answer, Darius, is I went into it for money, maybe for somewhat selfish reasons, but now I'm able, because of the degree and because of the career, to give back.
Believe it or not, that was a great answer, man.
Yes.
that was a phenomenal answer. Judge Owens, same question to you. Why did you decide to join this legal field?
Yeah, and Derrick, I think that was a phenomenal answer. And I think that was a very truthful answer for young people, because I think that is still a good reason to go into law. And my answer is a little bit like Derrick's, in that I didn't come from a family of doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. My sister and I have a twin sister, and we've always just loved education. We've always done well in school, but we knew that we wanted to almost just break the mold in our family. Like our mom, she is college educated, but she finished college when we were in college. So it wasn't like we had come from a family of just a bunch of college educated individuals. And so I grew up with this burning desire to try to be great, because I wanted to be able to be better, to do more. And so I always knew that I wanted a profession. That was very important to me, that I had a profession. And I'm kind of a simple woman. There were two things I wanted to be growing up. That was a news reporter and a lawyer. And the news reporter thing just kind of went by the wayside. And I said, I love to talk. I love to interact with people. And so I want to be a lawyer. And I lawyer to make money, to break the mold. Now, I did end up making as much money as Denzel and Derrick here, but I found my calling in the area of criminal law. And so, as Derrick said, once lawyers render service, and I think it's the same for judges too. I'm a criminal court judge, so of course I have to send people to prison, but I get an amazing opportunity to help a lot of people who think, oh, the criminal justice system is not going to be fair to me. Nobody's going to listen to me. And every single day I get an opportunity to let them know that no, someone will hear you. We will listen to you. Even if I have to punish you, I still will listen to you, and I will take that into account when I craft a sentence that will punish you, but also protect the community. And so, like Derrick, I went into it because I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to be great and wonderful and break the mold of my family. And then I just found my calling in the area of criminal law.
Mm.
Another phenomenal answer, Judge. Okay, so I think here's what I'm going to do now. I want to sort of split it up a little bit and ask questions that are sort of pointed at different individuals. So Denzel, I'll start with you. just tell us a little bit about like what you majored in college. Did that major help you in law school? And then also after that, like what law school you decided to go to and why?
So I went to Birmingham Southern for undergrad, and at Birmingham Southern, I majored in political science and religion. And so it was great. And I actually had a minor in human rights conflict. And one of the reasons I chose those is because I don't think you can have one without discussing the other. I don't think when you think about religion and the impact it has in the world, I don't think you cannot talk about politics. And when you talk about politics, I think you have to be real and talk about the intersectionality that religion has with it. And so that was the reason I chose it. I didn't really choose it because of any sort of reasoning of going to law school. And another reason is because I was horrible at science. All the people in my family have the science mind, and I was the odd man out, and I didn't get it. And so going into law school, I think it was helpful because my political science background was, you have two types. You have the type that's kind of like focused on the government and history, and then you also have the type that is also focused on like the empirical stuff and the critical analysis, things like that. And I think that translated the most going to law school. I attended Cumberland School of Law at Stanford University, that's in Birmingham, and I really enjoyed it. And one of the majoring factors for me in choosing to go to Cumberland, well, one of the two, the first was location. I really was intentional about going to Cumberland. I wanted to go and invest in the city of Birmingham because, I've been in Birmingham for pretty much all my adult life. I went to undergrad here, law school here, and I love the city. I feel like this is the city where I've really found myself and my true calling and who I am, my identity. So I really wanted to invest in the city. I had a lot of great connections and mentors, and people who kind of invested in me. And so I wanted to be close to them. And I felt like it'd be a good transition for me personally. And then second, I love oral advocacy. I love trial team. I was on the trial team at Cumberland. And Cumberland had a nationally renowned top 5 trial program. And that was something that I wanted to be a part of as well. Once you step on campus, it's extremely competitive, starting from the 1L trial team competition all the way till the nationals your 3L year. And I wanted to put myself in that, kind of learn from the people who come before me. And so all that to say is, I think when it comes to majors, at least I can say on the defense side, I've always told people, pick something that you're passionate about and something you love. If you're a science-minded individual and you want to go to law school, all the merrier. I mean, I think we need more of that. And Derrick will probably tell you, there's so many cases where you have to tell the jury what this very minute, crazy science theory is, or some tool or some program. And a lot of times you're asking a lawyer who has no background in any of that to be the person to synthesize it and tell the jury. But go with something you're passionate about. Go with something that you love, because you're only going to hopefully go to undergrad once. And so you might as well make the most of it and invest. But also you think about what impact that, that major, that minor is going to have on your future goals and what you want to accomplish.
All right. Yeah, that's so true, man. So true. Derrick, question for you, man. What would you say is the single most important skill for students seeking a legal career to have? And then the second part of that question is, give an example of a way that you utilize that skill in your career.
Okay, so I would say, as a lawyer, they tell you that reading and writing, which is true. So I'm gonna skip that part. You gotta be able to, in any major that you get into, and so a skill of a lawyer is to be able to read and write. And I don't mean everybody can read and write. All the students that's going to listen to this can read and write. I just mean you got to sort of love it, and because there's going to be a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And so put that to the side. That's just something that's got to happen. But I would say this, more on a life skill, but it's also true with lawyers. And also the second, to answer your second question, I would say passion. I mean, if you love what you do, you've all heard it. If you love what you do, you never work. And so every one of us, you've heard each one of us say, and if Darius were answering these questions, he'd say the exact same thing. If you don't love what you do, then it's a drain. Work is hard. I mean, I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they come home every day telling me how hard school is and how hard it is to be a teenager. And I agree with them. I tell them, I say, yeah, it's really, really hard. It doesn't get any easier. I mean, it's hard to be an adult. It's hard to have a job. It's hard to provide for a family. And so, Darius, I'm going to cut this answer short by just saying, if you love what you do, you're never going to work. And so I think I've answered your question by saying, pick something that you love. I love representing people because I could see myself in them. And so that's what I would tell everybody.
All right, thank you. Judge Owens, I personally just want to know this answer from you. What do you like most and least about your job?
Oh, wow. What I like most is, this is one of the things I think whenever you're a judge, I think you have to be very careful not to become, as my sister would call it, drunk with power, because there's a lot of power in presiding over somebody's life. Like, it's not just a case, and you can't look at it as a case. It is actually somebody's life. So what I love most about what I do is being able to help people. And, that kind of sounds like a cliche-ish answer, but it's really not, because one day I may be able to help a defendant in that getting him drug treatment or diverting him from prison. And the next day I may be able to help the victims get some type of closure by sentencing a defendant to prison for a certain number of years. So that's what I love the most in that. I love what I do the most. I love being able to help people. And sometimes it's different people. And a lot of times, one group of people will leave the courtroom and they absolutely hate me. And the other group absolutely loves me. But, hey, I love what I do because I put a lot of thought into what I do. I don't take it lightly whenever I sentence anyone, whenever I'm taking away somebody's freedom. I do not take that lightly at all. Now, the least thing that I like is that I think now, and I hope this answers the question because I was thinking about this the other day, generationally, we've kind of come to a point where I think a lot of people, they don't want to take responsibility for their actions. It's always somebody else's fault. I mean, they robbed someone, but they're mad at me because I have to send them to prison. And so what I do not like these days, and I've seen this over my 13 years on the bench, it is almost as if there seems to be very little accountability. No one wants to take accountability for their actions. And I don't like that because I can work with you a little bit, if we're at the position of, okay, Judge, I did this, let me admit, my guilt here, but let's talk about mitigation. Let's talk about mitigating a sentence. And so that's what I don't like. And the reason why I say I don't like it, and I'll give an example, is because I sentenced someone maybe about a year ago. A guy killed someone in broad daylight in a store. The victim, the person who he shot and killed, ultimately, before he died, he made a dying declaration naming who shot him. And there were other witnesses. And so I sentenced him to a pretty lengthy time in the penitentiary, not overly lengthy. It wasn't life without parole. He would eventually be paroled one day. But he became a high security risk in my courtroom. He called me all kinds of names. I've never been disrespected like that in all my years. It was unreal. And it was unreal because he just didn't like a sentence that I imposed after the jury convicted him. So that is what I do not like. And maybe I take it a little more personally now because I have a family. When I first started, when I was on the bench, when I first took the bench, I didn't have children. Now I have a family. And so threats to me or my family, I take a whole lot more seriously than maybe I did, back in 2008 when I took the bench. So that's what I would say I dislike the most at this point.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that. Okay, so Denzel, I got another question for you, man. I'm sure you know a bunch of different lawyers and a bunch of different types of legal fields, and the whole point of this minority pre-law conference is to show students, different areas of law that you can basically practice. So if you could can you name some of the different areas of law that someone with a law degree can practice in?
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much you can do with a law degree. I think, when you, and this is a little bit of foreshadowing for when you guys get to law school, is, there's the process called the on-campus interviews, where, the big firms will come in and they'll start interviewing you, and everybody kind of gets this tunnel vision where they're like, oh my goodness, if I don't get interviewed by one of these firms, then I'm not good enough, or like I didn't succeed, like, or it's a failure. And I'm like, yeah, that's not even the tip of the iceberg on the things you can do. There are just so many things that you can accomplish without any of those firms or any of the quote unquote big law firms that are out there. For example, Derrick kind of talked about what he does in terms of, he's a plaintiff's attorney. So he's the one who's actually initiating the action. And you have all different types of plaintiff's attorneys. You have plaintiff's attorneys that specialize in healthcare litigation, so medical malpractice, if something goes wrong with a hospital, a nursing home, or with a doctor. Or, you have the people who focus on maybe the vehicle accidents, or you have people who focus on the civil rights issues, especially the issues with police brutality and stuff that is very timely in today's age. And then on the other side, you have defense. And defense, the same way with the plaintiffs, you can, from A to Z, there are different types. Like I said, I work with finance litigation. You have general commercial litigation, so you're working with businesses and corporations. You have employment and labor law, so you're working with, in the employee-employer relationship when people get hired or fired. Those are a little bit more of the spicier cases because you have the sexual harassment, the people doing things. You're just like, why would you do that? You have labor, so you're dealing with unions. You have bankruptcy, which is not really my type of deal. I say it's the boring type of law. And then you also have, you don't have to be in the courtroom. And I think that's another thing that you need to stress as well, because I think a lot of people kind of get the assumption of TV lawyer. You have to be in the courtroom, and, think about all the lawyers that you see in media, whether they're in shows, whether they're politicians or anywhere in between, they're presenting and they're in front of a big group of people. And that doesn't have to be your cup of tea. I definitely think it's a skill that everybody should have, but you don't have to put yourself in that situation. So you have the transactional lawyers. You can work for a company, be an in-house lawyer. So, if I've got a company and I'd rather just have somebody in-house working on all my business issues and legal issues, you can work in-house. Also, you don't have to be in law at all. You can go out and you can work at a nonprofit. You can be a politician. There's just so many things you can do with a JD outside being a lawyer. And so I think it's important that, you kind of assess that as well. For me personally, I think one of the great things I love about having a JD, I keep on quoting him because he keeps on dropping the nuggets. Derrick talked about you learn, you earn, and you return. I think that learning part is what I love most about working at where I work and, being a lawyer, is because I'm put in situations that I would never be put in if not for me having a law degree. I'm thrown in the fire a lot. I'm seen as someone who needs to have answers when people ask questions. I think it's an important skill to have because it teaches you how to be efficient. And it also forces you to understand your role in an organization. When people hold you accountable for something, you realize that, no, I probably shouldn't wait till tomorrow morning. I probably should do it tonight, even if that means I got to miss a show or stay up late or miss dinner. If you enjoy what you do and you understand the responsibility, I think there's a return. So there's just so much stuff you can do.
100% agree. Derrick, feel free to add to that list, but the question that I have for you is, what's been the most challenging aspect of your career?
I will, Darius, add to it because I want to brag on Denzel because I did what Denzel's doing. Let me just say this. So I clerked for a judge, like Judge Owens, right out of law school. I clerked for a federal judge who was a civil rights icon, Judge U.W. Clement. And I had accepted a job already, Denzel, to work at Lightfoot Franklin. And I ultimately went for 3 years to Lightfoot. But I remember I'd learned a whole lot from Judge Clement and, wanted to be him so bad. And he would mentor me. And I asked him this question, Denzel, you'll like this. I said, Judge, am I disappointing you and am I disappointing my race by going to big law, by going to Lightfoot Franklin after I finished my clerkship? And Judge Clement, if y'all know him, I know Judge Owens knows him, and Darius, I don't know if you know him, probably so. Judge Clement, when he really wanted to make a point, he'd pull his glasses down and he'd look at you and he'd say, Derrick, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to go make some money. So it's all about, but Denzel, let me just tell you what Judge Clement told me though, seriously. He said, he pulled the glasses down, he said what he said, and then he said, listen, you'd be an idiot not to go to big law, let them pay you a bunch of money to learn how to practice law. So what you just said is music to my ears. So you are learning from the best how to practice law. And oh, by the way, they're paying you a whole bunch of money to do it. So I don't want to add anything to his answer, but I just wanted to sort of, congratulate and let everybody know that is exactly what the country needs, because we're going to get to in a little bit that there's not a lot of us anyway, and there's certainly not a lot of Denzels. There's a lot more Black lawyers that do what I do than do what Denzel does, and can do what Judge Owens does. So anyway, so hats off to Denzel, and obviously hats off to Judge Owens. But so the most challenging thing about what I do, Darius, and you face it too, is you want to help everybody. You want to take every case. You know in your gut when there's a wrong, but the law is the law, and the law will win. I mean, so if you can't fit, and this may be over everybody's head because we're not in law school yet at this point, you have set laws that some of it came from England and some of it are in these law books that y'all can't see that's in my office. But the law is the law. And so if you can't fit somebody's problem into the law, then you can't help them. And to tell somebody that you can't help them, sort of like, even though it's a bad analogy, when Judge Owens has to sentence somebody, the law is the law. And if you have committed a crime, yeah, the human side of Judge Owens probably wants to help. But, at the end of the day, you got to do what the law says you got to do. And so that is probably the hardest part of my job. And I'll shut up so y'all can get more questions.
100% agree with you, man. 100%. Judge Owens, same with Derrick. Feel free to add on to what all careers you can do with law. But the question I have for you is, what's a time that you've experienced some sort of failure in your career, and how did you bounce back from it?
Oh, wonderful question. Because I think when you go to law school, you've spent, 3 years of just of a very intense experience. And so when you get out, you think, oh, you're supposed to be the best lawyer known to mankind. You don't really understand that, it still takes you a while to learn how to be a good lawyer. And so I remembered, I told you that I was a prosecutor with the DA's office in Jefferson County before taking the bench. I remembered I was trying cases and I think this was I was in about the third trial week. I'd had 3 trial weeks back to back, and I was trying felony cases before a jury. I lost all 3 cases. That was a blow to my ego. It was a blow. I started thinking, is it me? And I remember by the 3rd week, and I heard the 3rd not guilty, I remember questioning myself, do I not have the power of persuasion? I remember asking myself that, like, is it me? Can I not persuade people to see things my way? And, because, hearing not guilty 3 times in a row, especially when you believe the person is guilty and you have a victim there and you are, fighting for this victim, and to have to go back and tell the victim, where I'm sorry, the jury either didn't believe you or they didn't believe that we had enough evidence, but all they think is that, they didn't believe me. And so a way I got over that was I remember when it came up to the next trial week, I remember saying, no, I'm going into this with a clean slate. I am going to put everything on the table. I'm just going to, keep doing what I know to do. And I'm going to keep working hard. And I cannot let self-doubt enter me. And that's basically how I just got over it. But I remember that time just as clear as if it were yesterday, just losing those 3 cases 3 weeks in a row. And I remember I was bruised. My ego was bruised. I didn't think I could persuade anybody. And, and what it was that, I was a young lawyer. There were some things that I missed, or there may have been some ways in which I could have evaluated, my case better to make a better offer on the front end of it. But those are all things, those are normal. Those are things that you learned from, but those are not things to deter you at all.
I love that. You got to learn to wipe the slate clean. I love that.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I think it's time that we get into the nitty gritty of this. The whole reason why we're here. You may not know it from this call, but we are minorities. And as minorities in the legal field, there are certain aspects of practicing law that, we kind of deal with differently. So Denzel, I'll start with you, man. You work in a big law firm, quote unquote, big law. So just tell us, what is big law, first of all? And then second of all, like, what kind of unique challenges do you face as a minority working in big law?
That's a great answer. I'll try my best to define this. And so I know I've mentioned it before, the term big law, but big law is essentially kind of what it is. It's a big law firm. So, usually you have over 100 lawyers, and you have a lot of offices, and your clients and the matters tend to be big. So you're representing, pretty big, substantial clients, and the matters are for a substantial amount of money. And so with that, it's a very corporate atmosphere. When you think of suits, people are walking around with suits. Like Darius is like very clean. He's got the tie on and everything. People are walking around with suits. It's a very corporate atmosphere. Pre-COVID, we'd have clients in the office. And so these clients are CEOs, presidents, general counsels. They're people who, if I saw them walking down the street, I'd be like, man, that person's got a lot of clout. They've got a lot of stuff going on. But with that, you don't have a lot of people who look like the people who are understanding, whether they be women, whether they be people of color, any sort of minority. Sadly, that's just not the case. And the issue is the pipeline. When you think about lawyers, for me, I always thought of like, if you're a lawyer, usually you have somebody in your family who's a lawyer. Because I never had anybody in my family who was a lawyer. But you look at the people who make the majority in any sort of systematic law firm, big law firm, and they've got that. The majority of them have the family, the grandfather, the father, the uncle, the aunt. They have that family connection. You really don't see that in the African American community. And so that is one challenge, is that you don't see a lot of people who look like you. And when you're in work, and Derrick mentioned passion, they're going to be those long days. They're going to be the days where you're not really too happy about work, and you want to confide in somebody, you want to relax, and you just kind of want to speak your mind. Sometimes it's harder for people to confide and speak your mind to someone that you're not really familiar with, and sometimes those boundaries, sadly, are either the color of your skin, or whether you're this or whether you're that, and that's really should not be the case. And so one of the blessed things that I have is that I think that we have a firm culture that consistently has been doing this, but especially in light of the things that have been going on the past year, has recognized that diversity is an issue and diversity matters, especially in such a big corporate atmosphere. So, they've been looking at the way that we hire, the way that we interview, the schools that we go to, the culture that we're setting, the laterals that we're bringing in. Those are all important. And I think it's important because whether you want to or not, all the people who are listening on this call, on this Zoom, once you become lawyers, people are going to look to you. You may not think that you have a lot of responsibility. You may not think you have a lot of power. That doesn't matter. You do. You may not have a lot of power, and you may not have a lot of responsibility at the organization that you're going to, but in the community, people are going to look up to you. Because, when you say that you're a lawyer, people automatically look at you in a different way. It's like, oh, wow, you're a lawyer. They give you some sort of reverence and respect. Now, some people may not want to talk to you. I can't tell you how many times I've called people on the phone. I'm like, I'm a lawyer, click, they don't want to talk to me. But, generally, lawyers are looked to people with respect. And so that responsibility is important, especially when you're minority, because you are, whether you want to or not, you are somebody that represents your group, especially when you're at a big law firm where some people may not have that consistent interaction with someone who looks like you. So it's important because, you have to hold yourself in a certain way, but also be true to your identity. One of the things I love is the people that have poured in me from law school, undergrad, even now as attorneys, especially those people who are people of color. They've always told me, don't lose who you are, be who you are. Don't try to mold yourself to fit any one category or identity. And so that's something that I've had to deal with, and something I'm still trying to deal with, because I don't think that I've fully reached that peak yet. But I'm definitely confident in who I am, whether they it bothers anybody or not. I know that as long as I'm doing my job, as long as I care about what I'm doing, and as long as I'm striving to be better every day, there's nothing really holding me back working at a big law. So that is one of the aspects. Derrick, I know you started out there, so I'd actually be really interested to hear your experience as well after you clerked.
Yeah, and that leads right into Derrick. Derrick, man, you're a partner in a law firm, man. You know, a lot of people on this call, they may not know what a partner is. So just explain what it means to be a partner in a law firm, and then also, you know, how you become a partner in a law firm, and then what unique challenges do you face as a minority partner? And by minority, obviously, I mean your race and not a minority partner.
No, I'm with you. So, so first to answer Denzel, so yeah, I actually enjoyed my time at Lightfoot. I tell everybody, I learned how to practice law at Lightfoot Franklin. Lightfoot Franklin, for everybody listening, is another big law firm. They specialize, all they do is litigation, and those boys know what they're doing. I mean, they are one of the best firms in the state of Alabama, and they really know what they're doing. And so my experience there, I wish I had some story to tell you, but I think it was good. I mean, they tried. Denzel is absolutely correct. Diversity matters. The reason diversity matters is because the community looks differently than big law. The community looks different than corporate America. The community wants to see Denzel. They want to see Derrick, and they certainly want to see Judge Owens more than us. And so that matters. And, you know, if you go down to the Black Belt, if you go down to Barber County, or if you go down to even Montgomery these days, and you have your big law firm that doesn't have somebody looking like Denzel, you are going to get crushed. And that's just not law. That's also Coca-Cola. I mean, look at not Coca-Cola, but yeah, Coca-Cola, but also look at what happened with the All-Star game. I mean, when you are doing things that are affecting a consumer-based group, which I don't want to broad brush and say that minorities are consumer-based, but we make up a big part of the consumer economy. And if you are doing things as a group that are insulting your base, your clientele, then there are going to be consequences. And so Big Law has figured that out because they're smart guys, and Lightfoot figured that out, and they started hiring minority lawyers because they needed them, and we helped, and I had a good time at Lightfoot. I really did. So my experience was not anything like I've heard a lot of the horror stories. It wasn't that bad. That being said, with my skill set and with what I knew I could bring to the table, you know, and now it will answer your question also, Darius, to be a partner in any law firm, plaintiff, defense, whatever, you have to bring something to the table, because being a partner just means you're part owner. You own a part of the group, and they look to you to bring in your fair share. And then when the revenue comes in, they're going to pay out the fair share. And so if you're a partner in Big Law, that means you're going to have, like Denzel mentioned, these CEOs and these management people and these guys who have clout. That means they're going to be your clients, and you actually brought them in. They are your client, and you're sharing that with your partners and with the group. Same thing on the plaintiff side. It means that you are going to bring in business. So clients are going to trust you, and they're going to hire Derrick Mills, and then Derrick Mills will then share with the firm. And so what it takes to be a partner in a law firm is that. Can you either bring it in? Can you work it? Work it means, can you do the day-to-day things? Taking the depositions, which I don't think most people will probably know on this call. Can you take the depositions? Can you go to trial? And can you deliver? And can you win a case? And can you bring in money to the law firm? And if you can do that consistently, then any law firm, whether it's Big Law or if it's plaintiff law or if it's a small firm, can you bring in the money, and can you show everybody that you can do everything it takes to share with your partners? And so what it took for me was years and years of showing that I was competent, that I could do the work. And then the extra piece, which Denzel will quickly get to just based on this call, I know he will. Can you also bring in the business? Can you bring in new business? And can you continue to generate revenue? And so that's what it takes to be a partner. But I will tell you this, now more than any time in my career, I've seen America respond to diversity more than anything else. And don't get discouraged by the backlash. I mean, you're always going to have the folks that are in power sort of nervous about how things are changing. But please, 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 everybody just sort of see what the majority of Americans are doing, what the majority of the country is doing. And what they're doing is they're seeing the benefits. They're seeing the what minorities bring to the table, and in every field. So I hope most people on this call are going to be lawyers, but in every single field, we're starting to see the benefits of diversity. And so whether it's big law, whether it's plaintiff law, whether it's, just being a lawyer, whether it's civil rights law, whether it's certainly, I hope you asked the judge the question too, whether when a victim or an accused walks into her courtroom and they see a face that looks like them, whether it's a politician, the Georgia senator just won, whether you're now starting to see that young folks that look up and look on the TV and they're seeing people that look like them, that is just incredible. And my daughter cried when Kamala Harris was sworn in as vice president. She's 16 years old. When I was 16, I wasn't thinking about that. When she saw Kamala Harris sworn in as the vice president of the United States, she cried like a baby. And so diversity, it's, like Martin Luther King said, the wheels of justice are slow, but they're moving. I don't think he said that actually. But anyway, y'all know what I mean. All I'm saying is diversity is important and it's working. And I think the big mules, which means, corporate America, white America, is starting to see that it's working. And so there's always going to be a place for us. And as long as you can produce, as long as you do what you're supposed to do, keep your head down, work hard, be competent, there's always going to be a place for us. That was a long answer. Sorry.
That's what we're looking for, man. I loved it. Judge Owens, for you, tell us a little bit, like, how does one become a judge, first of all? And then what unique challenges do you personally face as a minority female, in a field that's largely male dominated, such as being a judge?
Okay. How does one become a judge? First, of course, you have to complete law school. And in the state of Alabama, we have some requirements before you can run for office. And in order to be a district court judge, I think you have to have 3 years of experience. You have to be a member of the bar for 3 years. And in order to be a circuit court judge, it has to be 5 years. And those are relatively low bars to experience. And so for me, I would say, how does one become a judge? You go to law school. I think you learn how to be a good lawyer, how Derrick and Denzel, they were talking about, how you really learn how to be a lawyer when you first come out of law school. I think you should spend that time getting yourself, making yourself better. And as I shared with you, losing the cases and learning from the losses, because I will tell you that when I was practicing law, I learned a lot more from the cases I lost than the ones I won. And whether that was, I know what not to do, I understand how this came across to the jury, or now I know, another way to get that evidence in. And so you do that. And in Alabama, there are several ways to become a judge, and probably like all other states. But if you would like to be a municipal court judge, those are judges for the different municipalities. And the city of Birmingham is the largest municipality here. Those are appointed positions. You're appointed by the city council every 4 years. So there's a little bit of, politicking there, but you politic with the city council, and every 4 years you're up for reappointment. Now, if you're interested in being a state court judge like I am, then you have to run for election as a state court judge. And it is a county-wide election. You run the entire county in Jefferson County. And when you become involved in county-wide elections, you find out that Jefferson County is a huge county because you have to campaign the entire county. And so that's for state court judges. And if you would like to be an appellate court judge, a Supreme Court judge, those are also state court judgeships, but they are statewide elections. So you have to run the entire state of Alabama. And so that is how you, for state court judgeships. Now, if you're interested in being a federal court judge, federal court judges are nominated by the president, right? Denzel, Derrick, y'all help me out on here. They're nominated by the president. But the wonderful thing about a federal court judgeship, it is for a lifetime. Whereas my state court judgeship, every 6 years I run for reelection. And if I don't have reelection, if I don't have opposition, then that's wonderful. Then I just go through to the next term. But my terms are for 6 years as a state court judge, which I'm, very grateful for. I like that a whole lot better than every 4 years. And what challenges have I faced? I am often asked this question, and it's always really hard for me to answer it. And it's hard for me to answer it is because I don't think I really focus on the challenges. Admittedly, I got on the bench when I was younger. I was younger than most of my colleagues on the bench. And so I've always kind of felt like an outcast on the bench because I was younger. And at the time, there weren't a lot of judges who looked like me when I took the bench. And so there was a little bit of that, but I attributed that to my age. A lot of them were older, and yes, they were white men, but they were older. So I would have felt like that, even if they were mostly white women. And so the unique challenges, I could say, maybe making sure that they took me as seriously as I took them, but I don't even know if that is a very truthful answer because I just have never focused on, what would have been a huge challenge because when I ran for this seat, I knew I could do the job. And I think that's very important that whatever you decide to do, then I think it should be something that you are very comfortable in doing, that you're passionate about, and that you know the job. So I knew I could do the job. So I really didn't care what anybody thought about me being so young running because I knew that I was qualified to do the job. Because if I wasn't qualified to do the job, then I wouldn't have run for the seat because I loved being a prosecutor at the time. But I ran for the seat because the governor at the time had appointed someone to the seat who, by my accounts, had never practiced in our courthouse. And I felt like that was just, politics at its best. The governor had appointed someone who had never been over in the courthouse, and I was enraged by it. I said, these are people's lives. How do you just pull someone who's been practicing law in another area and put them in the criminal courthouse presiding over life or death issues? I was enraged at the time, and thank God I was, naive enough to believe that I really could win because this is before a time that I believe that, minorities were winning in Jefferson County. But I was on the ticket with Obama, and I did not realize, timing is everything in life. And I did not realize the amount of traction I would get because I was on the ticket with Obama. I told my husband, hey, I think it's time for me to do something. And I share that story with you guys so that if you have a burning desire to right a wrong and you are prepared for the moment, and you don't have to have everything fall in place, but if you are prepared for the moment, and for me, I prayed about it and I received a sense of peace. And so I knew this was the right thing that I was doing. So I left my job and I put a campaign together and it has worked out well for me. And I didn't like the governor playing politics in the criminal courthouse because I'm just that passionate about the criminal courthouse. So if you find a passion, as Derrick has said to you, if you find something that you're passionate about, then be willing to go all in for it. And so I guess, Darius, that's a long way of saying I don't really know the unique challenges. I've never really thought much about them because I've always thought, hey, I deserve to be here. I know why I'm here, and I am very well versed in this area of the law.
I love that, and I think it's important for all of us to feel like we deserve to be here, and everyone on the call, exactly. So all right, so I think we're kind of running short on time here, but real quick before we go, I kind of want all three of you guys to just sort of give everyone listening to the call just a last plea as to why we need more people that look like us in the legal field. Denzel, we've started with you the whole time. We'll start with you once again, man. Just why do we need people that look like us in the field?
Yeah, I just want to say, I hope y'all know I'm learning probably even more than the people who are the minority pre-laws right now. This is awesome So thank you, Derrick, and thank you so much, Judge Owens. I'm just, I'm hyped up right now.
Same.
For me, this is why I think it's important. And I've had so many instances in my life where I'm like, man, that worked out. Like, that's crazy. I've always wondered, is it because of this or is it because of that? And I think if I sum it down, I think it's one thing. And actually, Judge Owens, your sister told me this. It's the importance of owning who you are and your story. That's why it's important. Because what Derrick said is, corporate America doesn't reflect America. Corporate America has its own identity, and then America has its own identity. And we call America the melting pot because that's exactly what it is. I'm a Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria, but at the end of the day, if you look at me, I'm a black man. No one's ever going to say, oh man, look at the Nigerian kid. Oh, that's a black guy right there. That's my story in America. And I own that story. And so when I walked in on my first day at work, I was like, I'm a black man who's a lawyer working at this firm. And so when I'm interacting with people can connect with me on that way. You're black, I'm black. Oh, wow, we have that connection. We've shared the same struggles in America. We identify with each other. That doesn't mean I can't interact and identify with other people. It's just we have a shared commonality. And I think that's the reason it's important, because if corporate America, if corporate law firms cannot connect with America, then where is the justice? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a different type of law that we do, but justice still must prevail. So if the community is not seeing justice and seeing their identity in corporate America, they're not having their needs and their wants reflected. And I think that's what is so important, because that representation doesn't just mean anything for all the people on the call right now, not even for the pre-laws and minority pre-laws who are watching this. This is for that generation that comes after them and the generation that comes after them, because it's so crazy how we're all connected on this call. Derrick clerked for UW Clement, and another person that clerked for UW Clement was Judge Abdul Kalan. And Judge Abdul Kalan, two people that clerked for him are on this call right now, myself and Devin. And so you see that pipeline of people who have invested in people behind them, and it just grows and it grows and it grows. And I think that's why it's important. There's an African-American attorney at my firm who's one of my mentors, and I'll never forget, he told me that, he's like, Denzel, when I first walked into the elevator in this this building, I had a lady walk in and tell me I'm going to the 15th floor. He thought the attorney was the bellman who was ringing the elevator. And it's crazy now, because I walk into that office every day and I don't feel any different at all. I just walk in like it's work. It's because people came before me and fought a fight. And so that's the reason it's so important that we have diversity in this field, regardless of whatever field you're in, is because there are people who are going to come after you who are going to reap the benefits. But it takes one person, one individual, to say, this is not right, to identify the problem, kind of like Judge Owens did. Identify the problem, be passionate about it, and say, I'm not going to let anyone else stand in the shoes or wait for anybody else to fix this problem. I'm going to be the person who takes action and the one who decides to be the cog in whatever leak is going on. So that's why it's important, man. It's because there are people who are going to come after us, people that we'll probably never interact with, who are going to reap the benefits. And it's important that we stand in those shoes.
So important, man. So important. Mr. Mills, what do you think, man? Why do we need more people like us?
Once again, Denzel just sort of stole everybody's answer. That's a good answer. My goodness. I teach a class, Judge Owens, I bet you don't know this, but they started a new elective class this year, and I'm teaching it, and it's called Race, Racism, and the Law at Ramsey. Yeah, at Ramsey. Yeah. And that's why I was late today. I had to teach that class before this. And I start that class, and this is why, Darius, I start that class with, I think, the most beautiful writing that's ever been written, which is the Declaration of Independence. In my opinion, it is, the way I talk to high schoolers, and the minority pre-law students are high schoolers, right? Is that right, Darius? Okay.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. I start that class with this. The Declaration of Independence was written by the leaders of the colonies, and it basically said, we've had enough. You've trampled on our rights. You have done this to us. You've done that to us. You've mistreated us. You've discriminated against us. And therefore, we declare ourselves independent. And the race part of that is they didn't mention us. What the Declaration of Independence was not about us. It was not about people that looked like us. And my burning question that I ask everybody in the class is, were Black folks even on the minds of the leaders when they wrote this beautiful writing that says all people are created equal? I mean, it is really, if you just read it, it's really, really a good piece of work. And so, you know, the initial answer is probably what y'all are thinking right now. No, they weren't thinking about us. They were absolutely thinking about us, but we weren't citizens. And we saw that later with Dred Scott. We saw that later with some of the Federalist Papers, Constitution. They weren't thinking about us because we weren't citizens. But you have this great piece of work that says human beings, right, have certain rights. And those rights, if you trample on them, we can break with this government, right? And so that's why being a lawyer is important. If you think about it, if everybody on this call, not the lawyers and the judge, obviously, but if everybody on this call will go back and look at the signers of the Declaration of Independence, see how many of them were lawyers. Go back and look at the framers of the Constitution, see how many of them were lawyers. And it goes back to what Denzel said earlier. We're leaders, whether or not you like it or not. You're a leader. If you're a lawyer, you're a leader. You founded the country, the profession. You say what the law is, which governs the country, right? So as a lawyer, you're a leader, like it or not. And so why wouldn't you, to the students, why wouldn't you want to be a part of a profession that is going to set policy, that's going to set the future of this country, that's going to direct how this country will look in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years? All the lawyers on the call know we still quote law from England that was 250 years ago. So why wouldn't you not want to be a part of a profession where you yourself, with your passion, with your talents, are setting that stage and setting that policy? So my question to you, you asked me why do I need to tell them to be a lawyer? My question is, why not, right? So all the people listening on the call that are the leaders of their school, why not? Why not be a lawyer? That's it.
Love it. Love it. Finally, Judge Owens, why do we need more people like us? Why do we need more Black lawyers and judges?
Well, you know, I think Denzel and Derrick did an excellent job explaining why we need more lawyers. So I will answer this from the perspective of judges. It is very important that when people walk into a courtroom, that they are able to see faces that actually represent the community. Jefferson County, we're fortunate here in Birmingham and Jefferson County, and that our bench is representative of the community, but it is not like that throughout the entire state of Alabama. And I think that's very important because, as Derrick has, you know, said a lot, diversity is important. Diversity matters. And there are certain ways in which I may think about things that some of my other previous colleagues wouldn't have thought about things. There are ways in which I may understand things that other people wouldn't understand in certain ways. And so it is very important that the justice system is representative of the community in which it serves. Extremely important. And I do think that by having a diverse bench, by seeing me on the bench, I think that there are times in which defendants have come into the courtroom, and it doesn't mean that they are punished any less just because they may be a Black defendant and I'm a Black judge. But I do believe that they believe that the justice system works because I will listen to them, I will hear them, and I will do my job. You know, I will do the job of sentencing them, but I will sentence them fairly and I will sentence them with understanding. And so I say to all of you young students, it is important to be a part of the entire system. You know, we often complain about the justice system. Well, in order to fix it, as Derrick has said, why not be a part of it? And that's from the bottom to the top. Be a part of every part of it. And having judges that represent the entire community is so important so that we have true justice in this, you know, in our lives.
Wow, great answers from everybody. I think that's all the time that we have for this. This panel has exceeded expectations. You guys did amazing. If you're listening to this right now, I would honestly run it back and listen to it again. So many gems were actually dropped on that. It was amazing. I want to say personally, thank you to each and every one of you, Denzel, Derrick, Judge Owens. Thank you all for being here and being a part of this. And I think now this is where we sign off.
Thank you.
To me, diversity in the legal profession means taking different people's characteristics and ideologies and putting them all together into one big melting pot so that you can represent your clients the best way possible. As you may or may not be aware, out of all of the attorneys in America, only 2% of those attorneys are Black females. So I fall into that 2% category. And I'm really excited to be a part of a firm that actually promotes diversity in the legal profession and is constantly trying to bridge that gap. Most recently, Lightfoot, Franklin & White rolled out 2 diversity initiatives that I'm really excited about. One being the Lightfoot Academy, where we will host highly qualified diverse candidates for 1 week at our law firm. Those students will either be seniors in college or they'll be students that are interested in going to law school. The second diversity initiative that we recently rolled out is a diversity scholarship, where we'll be rewarding one student a $10,000 scholarship to come to our firm for the 6-week clerkship program to clerk with us and to learn about being a trial lawyer. These are just 2 of the ways that Lightfoot, Franklin & White has created ripples in the tide for change.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We have Patrick Cooper here, who is going to talk to you all about his interesting and diverse career. And Patrick, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell the students about your background educationally and professionally.
Certainly, and good morning, Blair. So my name is Patrick Cooper. I'm from Mobile, went to McGill-Tulane High School back in the day. And someone had persuaded me when I was a senior in high school to apply to Ivy League schools. I had no idea what Ivy League schools were, but I went ahead and did it. So I ended up going to Yale for college. And for you folks who are not quite seniors, but a little younger, like college is 4 years. And after I played basketball at Yale also. And when I finished up Yale College, I decided I wanted to become a lawyer. But I had a problem, which was I was such a so unsophisticated coming from Mobile. And it was such a culture shock going to this Ivy League school like Yale. I partied too much and hung out too much and didn't do my academic work. And I decided that I wanted to come back to Mobile and be a postman. And my dad kicked me out of the house and told me no dropout was going to live in his house in Mobile, Alabama. And by the way, along with me leaving early, I ended up getting 5 Fs at the second semester of my sophomore year. So I was had to go up to Washington, D.C., live with Aunt and dug ditches and worked as a laborer cleaning out these condos that they were converting into more livable units, and had to take some classes at Georgetown. And I had to get A's to reapply to Yale. And it was during that time when I was working as a laborer in D.C., where I was around a lot of really smart people, painters, carpenters, laborers like myself, who had the innate intelligence, much greater than mine, but they didn't have the Yale opportunity. And they couldn't believe that I actually squandered this Yale college opportunity. So, and I also at this time met a friend who's still a friend, when I finally ended up applying for a position on Capitol Hill for a U.S. senator from Alabama. He had just finished up Harvard Law School, and we roomed together. And it was my exposure to him. His name's Calvin Biggers, went to Harvard for college, Harvard for law school, took me under his wing. And I really liked how disciplined his thinking and analysis was. And that's when I really decided I wanted to go to law school. But I had a problem. I had 5 Fs for one semester. So I had to, I got a couple of A's at Georgetown. It was really hard working during the day and going to school at night, but I knew I wanted to go to law school. I knew if I wanted to get into a really good law school, I'd have to get straight A's. So I reapplied, and Yale took me back, and I had a goal. I knew I needed to get a 4.0, all A's. And so I just buckled down, and that's what I did for I had to repeat the second semester of my sophomore year, but I had straight A's my last 5 semesters at Yale. So I knew I'd be in the running. And at Yale, there's one of the things everybody wants to go when you finish up college, if you want to go law school, is you want to go to Yale Law School. It's very small. Only 125 people were in my class. And I got in. So I basically moved my clothes and my furniture from across the street over to the law school. And I stayed there for law school's 3 years. So 4 years for college, 3 years for law school. So I was at Yale for 7 years. And one of only 3 Black students who graduated that year out of the 125. So, but I didn't want to come back to Alabama at that point. So I decided to clerk for a federal judge. That's a 1 year, what you call it, an internship, where I worked with a federal judge in Birmingham, a judge named Sam Pointer. He was very smart, and it gave me a great exposure on how lawyers try cases. And then after that, I wanted to go back up to the New York area. Yale's in New Haven, Connecticut. It's about an hour and a half north of New York City. So I went to work on Wall Street, and I worked at a big Wall Street firm called Cravath, Swaine & Moore. It doesn't mean anything to you, but it meant a lot to me because it was it was like working in a salt mine. It was a lot of long hours. And I did that for 3-4 years, doing litigation. And litigation is just a fancy way of saying that we are lawyers who try cases, get them ready for trial. And it's different inside typically. And the first cut you would make as a lawyer, if we see somebody and you ask them, are you a lawyer? Your next follow-up question, well, are you a civil lawyer or are you a criminal lawyer? And so I don't do criminal, never did criminal law. That's where basically you're trying to keep someone from going to prison. I do civil, where it's all about really moving money from one side of the table to the other in business disputes typically. So I did that, and for a few years, and then I decided I wanted to. My then wife had a little baby, who's now a lawyer herself, and she's about almost exactly your age, Blair. Went to Yale College. I moved out to San Francisco to work for another firm, and when I say these firms, they get big. For example, the Cravath firm had almost 1,000 lawyers. The firm I was with in San Francisco had about 500 lawyers. And that was a lot of fun. And one of the fun cases I did was I ended up suing Tupac Shakur, the rapper, for the wrongful death of a 6-year-old who was shot at one of these gangster rap concerts back when he had just left Digital Underground. And that was a lot of fun. And he had tried to settle the case. And I, not knowing anything about rap music, I wish I had, offered to sell it with the proceeds from a recently cut album called All Eyes on Me, which I turned down. And it turned out to be one of the greatest rap albums in the history of mankind. And they made a movie called All Eyes on Me. And they actually mentioned my lawsuit in the movie. So anyway, I did that. In San Francisco was great, but I had a hunger an urge to come back to Alabama, because one of the reasons I went to law school was I always wanted to use my law degree to help my community, help folks in Alabama, help younger folks like you, and help the Black community in Alabama, and in particular in Mobile. So I came back and I worked in a firm in Birmingham called Maynard Cooper. It was pretty small when I joined. It grew rapidly, and did that for a good long time. And I tried a number of cases, never lost a jury trial. And some might say I didn't try enough, but I would, mine were very big and lasted very long. But so that was a lot of fun. And, but I wanted to do just more than try cases. So I got the urge to step into politics. And I started a nonprofit called Birmingham Vision, where I raised several hundred thousands of dollars from corporations, where I would start programs to teach children in the housing projects in Birmingham how to play chess, and take them to chess tournaments around the state of Alabama to Atlanta. And we'd also provide meals and fans for the elderly. And then also I ran for mayor of Birmingham. And apparently the citizens of Birmingham do not like a citizen from Mobile running for mayor of Birmingham. So I lost in a runoff. And it was at that point where I switched from going from a large firm, where essentially it's called a defense firm, where you defend corporations when they get sued over money disputes, breach of contract, an antitrust violation, a securities law violation. So I switched to what's called the plaintiff side, where I actually sue the corporations on behalf of individuals typically. It's much riskier. When I was at Maynard Cooper, I was what you call a partner. And I owned part of this firm that at the point when I left had about 250 lawyers. So I owned a piece of it. I had equity interest, but it was good and safe, dependable income. And so when I switched to the plaintiff side, it's much riskier, because you don't get paid. You don't have Coca-Cola paying your hourly rate on a regular basis like clockwork that you can count on. So I work on a contingency. So I do class actions, which are complicated devices where it allows me to bring a case on behalf of a whole class of, say, buyers or consumers, and I just need one person to represent the class. And the class might have 10,000 or 40,000 people, and it's all on a contingency. So if I win, let's suppose I win, say, $30 million in this, and oftentimes these cases will take 6, 7, 8 years. I have it on contingency where I'll get a third of it. But if I don't win, I could spend 10 years on this case and you get zero. So it's kind of like going to one of these casinos over in Biloxi sometimes, and you're betting on yourself. I prefer to bet on myself than betting on some cards. So I did that. And I still have pretty much phased myself out of that. And I have taken some of the money I've earned, and I have invested it in a bank called Commonwealth National Bank. And we are one of only 16 Black-owned banks left in the country. The bank is 55 years old, right on St. Stephen's Avenue. It's right across from LaFleur High School. I have on my board of directors a vice principal from Blunt named Timmy Hale. I'm sure you young ones have heard of him. And so I'm the chairman of the board of directors at Commonwealth. And one of the things that makes me very proud of our bank is that we have made a commitment to really help businesses owned by people of color and by women who typically have a hard time gaining access to capital, which is a fancy bank term for a loan, so that you can keep your business going. So I take pride in the fact that we We don't look at just like how many checks you've bounced or what your credit score is. We'll scratch the surface and see what's there. We really make a big effort to get some loans to the community that really needs it.
Wow, I think that is all a testament to all the different things you can do with a law degree, and just in general, how you're never really tied to one career and you can explore different interests. I think in particular, your work with Commonwealth National Bank is interesting, given that we're kind of talking about non-traditional ways to use your legal background and legal education. Is there a particular skill or maybe multiple skills that you have found you rely on in your current role as chairman of the bank, and that's maybe carried through from law school through all the different professions you've had since then up through today?
Yes, Blair, and it's really layered. I would say one is that when you are involved in a business or own a business, it's all about people skills and making people like your business and like you. And you being a trial lawyer like me, one of the things you learn is when you're in front of a jury is half the battle is making the jury like you. And if they like you, you're going to win. They're going to root for you in that trial. And they're going to do what they can to make sure that Blair or Patrick Cooper ends up winning this. And so I take that experience, and that's one of the reasons I also ran for mayor, because I had felt the law really gave me an opportunity to develop a public personality and persona. So part of what we do at the bank is we're happy, and we greet customers and we make them feel wanted and that this is a home for them. So that's one. The law really teaches you how to put on a hat and really extend yourself toward people. So that's number one. Number two is being the chairman is when you're a lawyer, it's a very disciplined way of thinking and analyzing that you come to absorb. And you learn to really get to the heart of the issue, whether it's in a meeting with a client or whether it's in a cross-examination of a witness who's hemming and hawing and won't answer your question. You got to bring them back to the issue, and you just don't let them go off on some dilly-dalliance like they want to. And I'm sure your dad is like the retired judge up in Jefferson County would rein them in. You learn how to really control meetings. You learn how to really not waste time and really get to the issue and make a decision. And sometimes decision may be right. Sometimes it may be wrong, but you got to have a decision so you can move on. You just can't have paralysis through analysis. So you make decisions and you learn how to control these meetings. And third, for me, being a lawyer, the banking industry is perhaps the most regulated industry in all of America. So I'm constantly dealing with regulators, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the Federal Reserve. They're constantly double checking everything you do, and they throw these statutes in front of you. And so you, as a lawyer, I'm comfortable with reading the law and interpreting it and tell them, yes or no, I agree with you. And lastly, the law degree has been very helpful because we're a very small bank. We're the only home bank that's headquartered in Mobile. But we're small, even though we've been around for 55 years. So not only am I the chairman, I'm also the free acting general counsel who handles all sorts of lawsuits filed against the bank. And so that comes in handy. I wish I could get paid, but it's a labor of love.
That's really helpful. I think that really shows all the ways you can carry skills from law school through to different professions and tracks. And we just want to thank you for your time. I know the students have enjoyed it. And we'll provide your contact information to them afterwards so that if anyone has any follow-up questions or wants to discuss anything further, you can certainly reach out to Mr. Cooper and he will follow up with you. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I am delighted. And if any of the students want to ever come take a look at Commonwealth Bank, you tell them to come on over and ask for Mr. Cooper.
Yes, definitely. Thank
All right,
you.
thank
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. And today we've got Professor Joshua Porter, who is with the University of Alabama School of Law. And I will let Professor Porter explain to the students what his current role is and maybe give us a little background as well on where he went to college and law school.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Blair. Thank you very much to everyone who's participating in this. I think it's a phenomenal program and a great opportunity to expose yourselves to the legal profession and, you know, these other roles outside of strictly law firm, strictly litigation. So for me, once again, my name is Josh Porter. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the University of Alabama School of Law. I'm also an assistant professor at the University of Alabama School of Law. And my role kind of runs the gamut. So mostly what my role consists of is supporting diverse students, whether students of color, LGBTQ+, women, whatever the case may be, folks that are underrepresented in the legal profession. Supporting them through various programs and initiatives, whether it's mentorship possibilities or it's various programming such as film screenings, typically would be social events, but COVID kind of complicates that a little bit. And other programs, different panel discussions, I help organize or I help fund those different organizations and their programming that they want to do that's focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion and creating a more inclusive environment at the law school. I also I do trainings on civil rights laws and how they apply to current students. I run our summer pipeline program, which is called the PLUS program, the Pre-Law Undergraduate Scholars Program, in which we bring in about 25 to 30 students over the summer that are pre-law students, undergrad students, to take a mock law school course and also do various workshops on admissions and career services and professional development. I help with recruitment. I helped our Office of Admissions with recruiting diverse students specifically and just strategizing how to best recruit different students. And outside of that, also build relationships with the main campus of the University of Alabama, other schools at the University of Alabama, whether it relates to programming or different initiatives that are going on. Also build relationships with alums and recruiters, folks who want to hire people from the University of Alabama School of Law, where they have diverse candidates or they're looking for diverse candidates. So usually reach out to me in hopes of identifying different students. And I teach education law. Prior to this role, I was an attorney with the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, where I investigated discrimination complaints in K through 12 and post-secondary institutions. So my cases range anything from sexual harassment on college campuses to the school to prison pipeline and the disparities that we see among students of color as it relates to school discipline, immigrants' rights work, providing services to students with disabilities. So my work really was pretty diverse in that type of field. I attended Morehouse College undergrad, where I earned my bachelor's in English. Upon graduating from undergrad, I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I kind of wanted to take a break in between. So I spent 1 year as a 9th grade teacher in Miami, Florida. After that year, I moved back to Georgia, where I attended the University of Georgia School of Law, where I earned my JD and my Master's of Public Administration. After graduating from there, I spent about 2.5 years in Washington, D.C. doing various jobs for different nonprofits, whether it was a program manager for different grant programs or doing policy analysis and lobbying type work for a civil rights organization that was focused on education and juvenile justice. So that's my background in a nutshell. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got a lot of diverse experience. In particular, I noticed, though, that you said that you did not go directly to law school. You took, I think you said, a year to teach ninth grade students. Can you talk to the students a little bit about how you decided law school is the next step after working as an educator, and also in particular, why you decided to take some time off between college and going to law school?
Sure. So I think I realized I wanted to pursue law school maybe my junior or senior year of college. But it was kind of an abstract idea. It was, just kind of looking at career pathways and figuring out what the next step would be. But I knew I wanted to help people. I attended Morehouse College, and Dr. King went to Morehouse College, obviously way back in the day. And many of our classes were taught through the lens of social justice and civil rights and helping marginalized groups. And I felt the best way to do that was through the legal system. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do it or what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to help people, and I wanted to do some type of public interest related work. The teaching thing I kind of stumbled upon. I took the LSAT initially during my senior year of college, and I did well. I mean, I did okay, we'll be honest, but I didn't get into the schools honestly that I wanted to get into. And I figured, maybe taking a year off, retaking the LSAT, getting some work experience would make me more competitive as I was applying for law schools. So in the meantime, I had to figure out what it was I wanted to do. Well, as an English major, the most natural progression was to teach. I mean, there's never a deficit of teaching jobs. So I found this teaching job in Miami to do. And that's when I fell in love with the idea of education law, or helping young people, for instance. So that year off was very informative for me, because I just went to this whole teaching thing of just this idea of, I'm just going to do this for a little bit. I'll go to law school and figure it out. But as I was teaching and seeing some of the things that my students were going through, some of the disparities that exist as it relates to different resources that they received. I taught at a very underserved community in Miami. And if you went just 10 miles up the road, you saw one of the best high schools in the nation. And, the resource that my students had, as opposed to the resource that, this amazing high school down the street had, it really made me interested in investigating, okay, why do these disparities exist, and what can I do to help kind of bridge that gap in some ways to make sure that all students are getting the resources that they need. So that kind of informed my decision. So my year off was super important for me, because it really gave me a sense of what it was that I wanted to do. That doesn't mean that you have to take a year off. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily, works for everyone, but it really worked for me in terms of getting some work experience. First off, I think that it made me a much better applicant, knowing that I had that work experience, but also just kind of helping me to tailor what it was that I really wanted to do.
Well, as it relates to, it's interesting how many different roles you've worked in since law school and prior to law school, but in particular since law school and the jobs you've held now and with the Department of Education. Were there any particular skills, looking back now at law school, that you think you've learned and you've been able to apply in these different settings, whether it's one skill that you've been able to carry throughout or different skills for different roles?
Yes, I think the biggest thing, or one thing about just the law in particular, is just how important relationship building really is. Regardless of what field you go in the legal profession, you're going to have to network in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's what law school taught me. And just my career in general was, if I want to get something done, if I have a case regarding immigration law, I only know this much about immigration law, but I know someone I went to law school with who, they were really passionate about that. So I was able to contact them and just ask questions, just general questions. That's one thing I think gets lost in law school experience in general, is that eventually, after 3 years, those become your colleagues. Those are people that you work with. Those are, you're going to be seeing those people well after law school, which isn't the case with undergrad. Not everyone I went to undergrad with wasn't someone necessarily that I went back to, get career advice from, or someone that, could hook me up with a job one day, or whatever the case may be. But in law school, everyone's going relatively into the same field. So you'll be working with these people. And, your relationships and also your reputation that you carry from law school can carry you well into whatever it is you want to do next. And I think that's one thing in particular that's really carried me up to this point. at Department of Education, a lot of the work involved working with attorneys from different school districts, different universities, trying to figure out, they have a client. I'm representing the federal government, and trying to find ways in which we could best to bring resolution to whatever the claim may be. And I think those skills, just in general relationship building and strategic thinking, and being a good communicator, being good with people, has helped me in this role, because I'm constantly interacting with professors and alums and students and interested students and folks from different bar associations, whatever the case may be, to help develop programs to help address any problems that may come up. So more than anything, I would say just the idea of relationship building is something that you could take from law school and just carry that forward.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And I neglected to ask you, I'm not sure if you have any lawyers in your family that, or if you had a concept or an idea of what law school was. And I say that to say, if you have, what would be a piece of advice you might give to a student who's considering law school? Granted, they're in high school now, so it's down the road, but something they could be thinking about now and over the next couple of years to evaluate if it's the right decision for them.
I would say just, you're never too young to network, never too young to reach out to someone to see what can happen. I think the best way to get experience to see if it's something you want to do is, see if you can intern at a firm or at an organization. Of course, as a high school student, there's only so much you can do, but, especially these nonprofits or organizations that may not be as funded as other places, they always need some type of administrative work, whether it's helping to answer phone calls or file some things away. And you could get a sense of what it's like in that particular work environment. You could talk to attorneys. You can ask if you can shadow them for a day to see what their day-to-day looks like. You can kind of get those ideas early. I mean, I knew people who were, college students, freshman year of college, that were working at law firms over the summer, just doing, just doing admin work, but really whatever it was that the attorneys needed them to do. So they had a sense and they had this idea of what it was that they wanted to do before they even went to law school. And also it was really attractive to admissions officers because, we could see a demonstrator of, wow, this person really is really interested in the law. And they had an idea of kind of what the legal profession consists of and what a day in the life of an attorney in this particular practice would be. And so I think that's really, really attractive to admissions counselors, folks who are making those decisions. So that's one thing I would do, or I would say, just get involved, reach out to people, get a LinkedIn if you don't have a LinkedIn, put together a LinkedIn and reach out to people in your network, reach out to people who went to the same high school as you or went to the same college, and just see if you could talk to them for 15 to 30 minutes about what it is that they do and, and just in general, what advice they would have for their particular field. So that's the advice that I would give broadly.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful. And this has been really informative. We appreciate your time. And I think the students are aware. We'll make your contact information available to them if they have any follow-up questions or want to explore any of this further. So thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Roger Varner. I'm here for the Minority Pre-Law Conference. I'm here today speaking with Captain Suntrease Williams Maynard, who's a JAG officer. Captain, could you please just briefly introduce yourself and give a summary of where you're from, where you went to law school and your work history since law school?
Absolutely. Good morning, Roger. It's great to talk with you this morning. As you said, I'm Captain Williams Maynard, and I know it's a mouthful. They talk about it even on base, so I go by Captain Sonny, which is a lot easier for everyone. But I am assigned to our base legal office at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm a part of the 81st Training Wing. Here in Keesler, we have a lot of different training units, so we do service all of the training squadrons and units here at Keesler. Prior to my assignment here, which was just October of last year, so I guess about 6 months, I was at 1st Special Operations Wing at Herbert Field Air Force Base, which is in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. So I was there for about 5 years. And then prior to that, I was at Lackland, which is also another training command, what we call AETC. So this is my third assignment in the JAG Corps with the United States Air Force Reserve. Anything in particular, Roger, you'd like me to talk about? Because the work history will definitely be very long.
Well, I'll say let's well tell the students, and if the students already know this, then sorry being repetitive, but just kind of tell the students what exactly the JAG Corps is, because I think we as lawyers may know, but then sometimes I think some some young individuals may not know, or even lay people who are adults. So if you don't mind just kind of telling everybody what that is.
Absolutely. And that's a very good question. And I say that because a lot of times when I'm walking in uniform and I'm off of the military installation, a lot of people, of course, one would thank me for my service, but a lot of times too, they're automatically assuming, and of course, JAG, we do deploy. So we definitely provide service downrange. However, but a lot of people just automatically assume that when you wear the uniform, it's all kind of just one thing, right? It's just everyone's doing the same thing. And I said, well, no, we have so many different professions I'm going to speak, of course, because I'm in the United States Air Force, in the Air Force. Like I said, I'm a reservist, but I'm a non-traditional reservist, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But essentially, the JAG officer is a lawyer for the military. So I just want our young people to just be open in general, because like I said, a lot of times they think, oh, well, we're all just always going to fight. And trust me, we always have to be ready, right? That's so important is what we do. But I just want our young people to know, because I didn't know this either. And I did JROTC in high school with the Air Force, but my mindset was not as broad as it is now to know that everything that we have in what we call the civilian world pretty much exists in the military. We have lawyers, we have doctors, we have engineers, we have, just about anything that you can think of, you can do wearing the uniform proudly.
So then after law school, or maybe it was during law school, how did you, come to the decision that you wanted to, join, do the military route of practice law as opposed to the civilian route?
So that's very interesting, Roger, because as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I did JROTC, which is a program in high school that gets you acclimated with, or at least familiar with, whatever branch of service that may be at your high school. Air Force was mine. And so back then, as a young high school student, I had, at least in my mind, I wanted to serve. But like I said, my thinking was limited as it relates to my capacity in which I could serve. And so where I'm from, because I come from very humble beginnings, a lot of people go to the military because can't afford to pay for college, or it's just really one of the ways in which we can actually get out of the circumstance that we're in. The military offers such a great career path and just opportunities. So at least in my mind in high school, I was thinking I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to enlist. I'm going to do, just take that route. And then, I got there and I had a change of heart. At that time, I had a change of heart. And I started learning a little bit more about the enlisted and officer ranks. So at first, going from high school, and you know what, Roger, even though I did the JROTC program, I was not familiar with ROTC. I encourage all of our young people to learn about ROTC, which is a program you can do in college. So you can take that officer track. So all I knew at the time was the enlisted track. And then I backed out a little bit because, well, not a little bit, but a whole lot, right? Because I didn't do it. Because in my mind, I always wanted to go to law school. That was something I wanted to do for a very long time. And so I just said, you know what? I know that this is a route to pay for schooling. I know that this is what, at least some of my family members have done. But I said, you know what, Suntrease is going to have to, Captain Sunny is going to have to follow her own path. And so I went ahead and went to college. I worked my way through, took out student loans like a lot of us, and then went to law school because, like I said, that was always my passion. And it wasn't until I was a federal prosecutor, action assistant United States attorney, which is a federal prosecutor, that I said, you know what, the time is now. It is, I have to get back to wanting to wear the uniform, wanting to serve. So I kind of took a detour, I guess, if you want to say, and went through the traditional route of the college, the law school, practicing law for about 5 years, I would say. And then I said, I'm going to raise my hand and it's time for me to take the oath. So,
has there been anything that, since you're interested, you are wearing multiple hats. You wore the hat of a federal, federal attorney. You're also, which, the students don't know, you wear the hat as a private attorney, but then you also wear the hat as a military attorney. So has there been anything that, what's been the biggest difference of being a government / private attorney compared to now you being in the military as an attorney?
Very good question. So definitely wear multiple hats for sure. Because like I said earlier, I'm a non-traditional reservist. And I know for the Air Force, we do have 3 different part-time programs. And that's the non-traditional reservist, which is me, which we call Category B, or the IMA program. Then we also have the traditional reservists, which most people are familiar with, and we call that like our weekend warrior. They go and serve 1 week in a month. And then we have our guardsmen, which is comparable to the traditional reserve program because they too serve 1 week in a month and then their 2 weeks annual tour. But for me, since I'm a non-traditional reservist, I have a little bit more, or a lot more, I should say, flexibility with my scheduling when I do serve, which has been very helpful for me in maintaining my role when I was a federal prosecutor to now as an attorney in private practice, where I can still wear the hat of serving our country and being a JAG officer. So I wanted to at least make that distinction so people can know, our students can know that there are multiple paths where if they want to go and do something else and still serve part-time, they can. Now, the great thing about being a JAG officer in comparison to what I've done as a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office, also as a trial attorney with EEOC, and now in private practice with Adams and Reese, is I look at being a JAG, as at least I tell some of our younger JAGs or our newer JAGs, this is kind of like a really well-rounded position where it allows you, or at least I consider it almost like a 3-in-1, at least when we're at the base legal office, which is where I am. And here we have, when I say a 3-in-1, to me, it's almost like working for legal aid, also being in-house counsel, and being a prosecutor. So for instance, being a base legal office, why I say it's all 3 of those things is because we still prosecute, or I still get to prosecute cases. We have what we have called courts martial when there is an allegation of misconduct or violation of what we call the UCMJ, the Uniform Code for Military Justice, which is comparable to your state code or your federal code. That's what outlines all of our codes. And if there is a violation of it, we will bring those allegations of what we call specifications and prosecute that airman. So you still get to wear the hat of the prosecutor. The reason why I say it's like in-house counsel, because we also have to, whatever it is, Roger, that happens on our installation, be it from contracts to any of our airmen wanted to take another job in addition to wearing the uniform, to ethics opinions, to anything that happens, we have to give a legal review or legal opinion to make sure that it is legally sufficient, that we're not violating any of our instructions, our Air Force instructions, or the DOD regulations. So everything that's done, we have to check it to just make sure it's legally sufficient. So the Air Force is our client. So we're advising them on the do's and don'ts. We're also advising the commanders, like I mentioned to you earlier, how at this training command, we support a lot of our training squadrons and units. So basically, anytime the commander has an issue with one of his or her airmen, they will also consult our legal office about the do's and don'ts, what adverse actions that they can take. So we don't tell them what to do, we tell them what they can do, what their parameters are. So we can say you can take as little action as this to as much action as this. Or is that. So giving them that dynamic and then letting them know so that they are also within the regulations to make sure that everything that we're doing is legally sound and sufficient. So that's the two hats. And then I said it's also like legal aid, because right now, actually, is, like I mentioned earlier, is our walk-in hours. So we normally have designated times throughout the week, and every base is different depending on the needs, where there's a time where our airmen and their dependents are able to come in and get legal assistance. And that can range from anything, Roger, from whether they need a will drafted, whether they need a power of attorney prepared, whether they have family law or domestic law issues. So we are even counseling our clients, our airmen, on unfortunately, divorce issues, child custody issues. We're also helping our clients in landlord-tenant disputes. So just basically helping them in a wide array of issues that they can come here and get legal assistance on, and we counsel them on that. Now, we don't go with them to civilian court, but we will make sure that they're adequately prepared to be able to go into civilian court. So those are like the three big things that we do on the base. Why I say you get to do a whole lot. Now, young people, what I want to say too, as a JAG officer, the great thing, or the distinguishing factor, is you don't always do your career at a base legal office. You get a chance to do so many other things, which makes this career so remarkable. You get to go, and there are different assignments, which we call. So every 2 to 3 years, you can get reassigned to something else. So like I mentioned, the base legal office, we do prosecution, or there's also an assignment for what we call ADC, which is our area defense counsel. So that means you get to perhaps be on the opposite side, of the prosecution. We also have medical law consultants. So when our airmen may be up for potential discharge, meaning getting potentially removed or separated, I should say, from the Air Force because of a medical condition, we have lawyers that are looking at that. So if you have an interest in medical law, we have an appellate division. We have a field support center for labor law that we deal with personnel issues. We have SVC. Look, I know y'all hear about SVU with Law and Order, but we have SVC, which is the Special Victims Counsel. And those lawyers are helping our victims. I mean, there's so many things that you all can do in the uniform. And that is what makes it so unique and different from whatever I have done in my civilian capacity.
I had friends, in high school and college, and one of the big draws to the military was essentially getting to kind of travel the world. You get to select your base, or you put your options of 3 different bases, and then the Uncle Sam, as we call it, or that our friends are called, will choose between those 3. Now, is that an option also for JAG officers if they were to, come out of law school and join the JAG Corps or later on?
Absolutely. So we do have, I guess what you could say, at least our active duty, a wish list, right? So you put all the areas in which you're interested in being, your geographical locations, but we have to always remember it's the needs of the Air Force, right? So it really depends on, they will try their best to accommodate, but it's always the needs of the Air Force. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's for active duty, and that's, right. You can go straight, after you go to law school, you can go and go on active duty and be a JAG officer. The reserve component is slightly different. And so I say that because the reserve component is almost like an application process. Like you apply for a regular civilian position for a lawyer. Well, I had to submit a resume and personal, write a sample, those sorts of things that go through a full application. And one of the things they also look for with the reserve component, which is different than active duty, is the reserve component, they're looking for experience. So they want to see the experience as a practicing lawyer before coming in the reserve component, because they look at it as, what I've been told, plug and play. They want to be able to plug you in an office or your assignment and play. You need to get to work, right? So, because a lot of times when people say, oh, Sonny, Suntrease, you're going on drill, is it just going to be training? Are you just going to be out there? It's like, no, I have to do work. It's not just coming here in a uniform and just doing a bunch of computer-based trainings. It's being acclimated fully in the office. So that's the difference. Active duty, you can go straight in. Reserve, you do need to have some experience. And I said that to say, getting back to my position as a non-traditional reservist, we too can provide a wish list. So unlike the traditional reserve, where I told you they are the 1 weekend a month, our weekend warriors, they belong to a reserve unit. And sometimes they can stay in those reserve units for a long time. The Air Force is taking a little different approach on that now. But for me, as a non-traditional reservist, I'm attached to an active duty unit. So no one would know I'm a reservist when I'm here unless I say I'm a reservist. When I say no one, that means the airman that's coming in for legal assistance, the commanders, unless we say, hey, I'm the reservist on duty that's helping. But I'm attached to an active duty unit, and I'm here alongside my active duty airmen, and we're working together, and every day when I'm here. But I do get a wish list too, because since I am the non-traditional reservist, I am expected to be reassigned every couple of years too, unlike the traditional reserve units. And I say that to say, I too do a wish list, and I'm trying to think, Keister may have been on that wish list, may have been further down. So I'm excited. I did get something on the wish list. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's always the needs of the service.
And obviously, what you've said a bunch of times, or told the students a bunch of times, that, you're speaking from, the role of a non-traditional reservist, but it doesn't sound like there's how you prepared to get to that point. It doesn't sound like it's too different than if somebody coming out of law school wanted to be active duty JAG, right?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Because like I said, the reassignments are there. The work is the same. The only thing that's different is how many days a year you do it, right? So, and of course, there's some other nuances, but the big factor is we do it in less days than our active duty component. But absolutely, the preparation is pretty much the same if you're going active duty versus reserve, except like I said earlier, the experience requirement. But this is just, I just say this to our young people because, like I said, I did not know. And this is a minority pre-law conference, and I'm going to say this to you all because one of the things we see in the Air Force, and I speaking to our sister services, and right now it's so timely where we're talking a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the Air Force is definitely on board with that, and they've been making a lot of changes. I'm still wearing my hair in a bun. That's been the traditional way, but we just had some changes even to our hair policy, which is very great, especially for those of us that have ethnic hair. So we've seen some of those changes. But one of the things I really want to say that I think is so important, and I mentioned this quite a bit even before these conversations started happening, is one of the things that I have observed as an officer in the JAG Corps is that there aren't a lot of officers that look like me and you, Roger, and you students that are viewing. And so, and I say that to say, because I really didn't have an understanding when I was sitting in you all's chairs or in your shoes, because like I said, my mindset back then, coming from humble beginnings, was you enlist. You do what you have to do. That's the opportunity you have, and that's the road that you take. And that's okay. And it is nothing wrong with, our enlisted ranks were so they keep things going. So we need people to obviously enlist. We need qualified, good people that enlist. But I'm encouraging all of you to also consider, the officer ranks and the professions in the officer ranks if you choose to go this route. Because like I said, it's a lot of times I may be the only one in the room. We're starting to get better. We are great with, I think, in terms of increasing the number of women, but the people of color, we're still not where we can be. So just make sure when you think about it, let's think about whether you want to wait, or like I said, find out, inquire about that ROTC program. I wish someone would have told me about it. Oh my gosh, probably gonna have to take out the student loans that I had to take out also. So just inquire. We're all attached to these things these days. And I Google is your friend, look it up, ask questions. I know we have ROTC programs in Alabama. I believe we have one at the University of South Alabama and Tuskegee, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely look at your options because we need more minority officers.
All right, and this will be the last question for you, Captain. If you could give the high school students one piece of advice, whether it's considering law school or post-law school, I say one last piece of advice, what would you have to say to the students?
What I will say, or what I am going to say to you all is, whatever your past may be, it is not indicative of your future. Whatever your past may be, it is not indicative of your future. And I say that because oftentimes I was told I was not going to be a lawyer, or I could not do this, or I could not do that because of the circumstances surrounding my family. And I want you all to know it does not matter at all what your parents may have accomplished or what they did not accomplish. If you in your mind want to do something, you can do it. You stay determined, you stay driven, and you stay focused. And there may be times when life happens, because it will, and I know for me, even going to college, the different hardships, and even as a young person, the different hardships, but I stay the course. You have to stay the course. I was reading something the other day, and I hope I do not misquote it. It said that you can find difficulty in every opportunity, or you can turn difficulty into an opportunity. And so I want to say that to you, that regardless of how difficult a situation may be, look at it as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and be successful. I often say, people say you have no testimony without a test. I often say, well, you do not have a message without any mess. So you all just stay the course, don't give up, keep it going, and you will be just fine.
Well, thank you, Captain Williams Maynard. We appreciate it, and I think that they've learned a lot from you. And of course, if anyone has any further questions, I can provide you with Captain Williams Maynard's email address, and that way maybe she can address any questions y'all have. All right, thank you.
Thank you for having me today, Roger. Good luck to all of you.
Sorry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We have Freddie Stokes here, who is our next speaker, and I will let Freddie start by giving us a little background on where he's from, where he went to college, law school, and what all he's done professionally during that time. Freddie?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with everyone. I'm excited to share my story. Again, my name is Freddie Stokes. I was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama, graduated from C.F. Viger High School in Pritchard, Alabama. Go Wolves. I went on to graduate from Alabama A&M University, had an amazing time at Alabama A&M, graduated as SJ president, went on to graduate from Cumberland School of Law at Stanford University, had an amazing time there. I did a bit of a non-traditional route after law school. So instead of sitting for the bar immediately and going into the practice of law, I decided to join Teach for America, which is a national program that places recent graduates and professionals in rural and urban communities to teach for at least 2 years. And I joined Teach for America thinking that they was going to send me to Miami or Chicago or South Central LA, and ended up being placed right back in Huntsville, Alabama, which I call my second home. It is where Alabama A&M University is located. I taught for 2 years, taught secondary social studies to 7th grade students. And after that, I worked for Teach for America on the HBCU recruitment team. So I managed recruitment for Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida from the historically Black colleges and universities within those 3 states. After that, I did some cultural work in the Mississippi Delta with Teach for America and decided to come on back to the practice of law. I ended up practicing in Huntsville for a bit and then moved back home. I was an assistant district attorney for Mobile County, prosecuting thousands of misdemeanor and felony cases, I went on after that experience to practice law for a pretty large statewide civil litigation defense firm. So I represented professionals and businesses who were being sued for various reasons, and corporations who were being sued for various reasons, and somehow found myself in my current role, which is Chief Executive Officer of the Historic Avenue Foundation, which, kind of getting back to my Teach for America roots and my culture specialist roots in the Mississippi Delta in many ways, but still using a lot of the experiences that I've learned and resources that I gained through law school and my legal career.
All right, thanks, Freddie. You really have done a lot. I think that is a testament to all the ways your JD can serve you. Please tell the students more about your current role as the CEO of the Historic Avenue Foundation, and what your day-to-day job and professional life looks like, and what the purpose of the Historic Avenue Foundation is.
Absolutely. So the Historic Avenue Foundation is utilizing the National Purpose-Built Communities model. And the National Purpose-Built Communities model mean that in order to really holistically revitalize a community, and in order to really eradicate and end generational poverty, you must focus on a place-based setting, and it must be a holistic approach. So what we're focusing on is excellent education, that is an excellent K through 12 pipeline, or in our case, pregnancy through college or career pipeline, starting as early as we can with children within our community. That's excellent mixed income housing, not just Section 8 housing, not just project style housing, but excellent mixed income housing, as well as community wellness and community resources that community needs to not just survive, to thrive. And you implement those three initiatives within a place-based setting. And within our community, we are focusing on an area historically referred to as the Avenue community. So we're pouring education, we're pouring housing, and we're pouring community resources within that community to help change the trajectory of that community. And we're not doing this. This isn't the Freddie Stokes plan. This isn't the Historic Avenue Foundation plan. We're doing this using the people in the community to change the community. You know, nationally, we're having this conversation about gentrification around our country. And gentrification, in short, is the rehab of communities, and in many ways, the displacement and replacement of not just people, but also cultures within cities and communities. And our approach isn't a gentrification approach. We're not coming in, we're not hijacking rent prices, we're not making the community such that people who historically live there can no longer live there. We're entering the community, working with the people who are there historically, people who are deeply invested in the community, and people who are currently living in the community to transform that community. And we believe that is the only way to end generational poverty. That is the only way to eradicate generational poverty, using the people who are very, very close to the problems in the community to also be very close to the solutions. That is how we turn the wheel. That is how we end and eradicate generational poverty.
That's right.
Sorry.
No, I didn't want to interrupt. I was just going to say it's really exciting to hear you talk about, and it's an exciting project as someone who's in Mobile to get to observe. And I'd love to hear more about your role as the CEO.
And the day-to-day of that is completely, for the lack of better words, wild. My day-to-day vary. You know, I may be in a meeting at 9 o'clock advocating for education initiatives, advocating for equitable education opportunities for children in our community. And then at 10:30, I'm fighting for housing opportunities. And then, you know, at 1 o'clock, I'm advocating for after school programs. And then at 4 o'clock, sometimes to 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm writing grants or updating grant applications or responding to grant applications. So the toughest part of my job, I would say, is also the most exciting part of my job, because as a prosecutor, you know, no one day was ever the same. And that was exciting for me. And even when I represented businesses at the civil litigation defense firm, no one day was ever the same. It was always twists and turns. It was always a very wild ride that I had to put on my seatbelt for. And that certainly has continued into this work as CEO of the Historic Avenue Foundation. No 2 days are similar. As I stated soon, hour to hour, day by day, I take it. And some days it's a dream and some days it's a nightmare. But as I've been told continuously, it's still a dream nonetheless.
Yeah, that sounds like, yes, I agree. No day is the same usually in the practice of law. Hearing you talk about in particular your current role, and even thinking some at your time for Teach for America, both as a teacher in the classroom and with your work with the organization, it seems to me that you've probably had the opportunity to carry some skills that maybe you learned in law school, or at least were able to start honing in law school and carry that through. Can you talk a little bit to the students about what some of those skills might be, whether it's time management? I heard you use the word advocating. I know you're advocating in your current role, and that may not be a skill people usually think about in the non-traditional legal roles. So could you talk a little bit about what skills you've been able to carry through into all the different jobs you've had since law school, and how your JD has benefited you as you've made these transitions?
Absolutely. No question about it. So as I stated earlier, I graduated from Cumberland School of Law, and we have one of the top 10 best trial advocacy teams in the country. Shout out to Cumberland for that. And I was an executive member of the Trial Advocacy Board. And I did participate in some trial competitions and trial courses. However, I decided to do a lot of my focus on ADR, or alternative dispute resolution. And that is, how do you solve problems without going to court? How do you solve problems without going to trial or filing lawsuits? How do you get people at the table to solve problems without the traditional method of problem solving in the legal industry? And that is court, right? You take it to court. So ADR, alternative dispute resolution, taught me tremendous skills in how to problem solve, how to get people at the table, how to make sure you're listening with the intent to be influenced, not just the intent to respond. So how am I listening to people to really gauge and understand more thoroughly what they're saying? I enter every circumstances and every situation with, first, with the intent to listen. I'm entering with, the intent to understand versus the intent to be understood. And I think those skills with alternative dispute resolution, certainly have rolled over into this work. They certainly rolled over in Teach for America with how I engage with students and parents and community leaders, even in the district attorney's office. The idea is, I was prosecuting hundreds of cases on a docket. I didn't want to try each of those cases, but I utilized those ADR skills to get some things settled, and honestly, to get some things tossed that probably should not have been charged or before the court in the first place. So utilizing those ADR skills have been tremendous for me, as well as time management and advocacy. With the trial advocacy program, a lot of it was the ability to speak on behalf of other people and the ability to advocate for other people. I think all of those things combined really have served me well in my non-traditional or non-legal environment here.
Those are great points. And I think they're all points that, serve you whether you're in a courtroom or doing something else after law school. And as you know, the students who are watching us here today, they're high school students throughout the state. So although law school might be a little bit farther in the future for anyone who's interested, I'd love to know if you have any advice for students in this current situation, that is high school students, who are evaluating next steps, whether that's college, maybe interested in law school one day, or just want to figure out how to even know if law school is something you're interested in.
Absolutely. And so if you've heard nothing I've said so far, I think what I'm saying now is really, really important, because I imagine that if I was in the 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, I'm sitting down, I'm listening to this seminar, and I'm thinking about law school, I'm like, whoa, that is so very far away. Like, I'm trying to get to college. But the reality is, while college seems far away and while law school seems far away, it is not that far away at all. You will be in college and law school dreaming of your high school days very, very soon, I promise you. And so now is the ideal time to begin to map out, what that looks like for you. If you're interested in law school, find a mentor, find someone who you can become invested in their path and they become invested in yours. I often tell people I didn't meet my first Black lawyer until I was in the 12th grade at Varner. So I wonder what, my path would have been and how much easier going to law school would have been if I had been introduced to a lawyer, period, before I was heading to college. So find those opportunities, seek those opportunities, even if they're not readily available for you. Ask your teachers, ask people within the community, hey, I'm interested in law school. How can you help me get there? And it's going to be important because as you begin to pick your classes for college, there are some courses that will make law school tremendously easier for you than not. I recall sitting next to people in law school in classes such as criminal law and business associations, and those me up because it was the first time that I had been content, and they were in those classes just breezing along because they had taken college courses that had prepared them for those courses. So not only were they in a position to probably have a much better GPA than me because they took those classes in college, but they also had greater employment opportunities because they knew very early on, hey, I wanted to go to law school, and how can I make sure that my college classes are going to supplement or introduce me at least to some of the content that I'll have in law school. And I think that made their trajectory through law school a lot easier. So, in sum, while it may seem like it is so very far away, I promise you it is not. There are tons of resources, through this program, certainly, and through your school, and through your community to, get involved and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, if law school is something that you want to do, or med school. There are tons of opportunities in high school and college that can make those graduate programs, which are hard, which are competitive, a little bit easier for you to get through.
Thank you, Freddie. This has been very interesting and helpful. And I think you made some great points. And as the students know by now, because I've said it in the other ones, we're going to make your contact information available for them if anyone has any follow-up questions. And I'm sure Freddie would love to tell you more about his experience if you've got any questions. So thank you so much. And we appreciate
Alabama A&M University.
Yeah.
Especially if you're interested in Alabama A&M University. Go Bulldogs.
Freddie's your guy. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. And thank you, Freddie, for your time.
Thank you so much, Blair. Appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Rucker, and I am a very proud Alabama lawyer. Welcome to the 2021 Minority Pre-Law Conference. Thank you to the Young Lawyers section of the Alabama State Bar for your diligence in making sure that this event happened this year. We've been through a lot. We needed it. Well, I want to bring you greetings from Huntsville, Alabama, where I live and work as a lawyer. And I'm so happy that we have this opportunity to spend a little time together today to talk about life as a lawyer. And I hope that you walk away from this with some nuggets of wisdom, some insight that maybe you didn't have before, and maybe even the desire to become a lawyer yourself. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a native of Washington, D.C., but I've been living in and out of Alabama for many years, over 2 decades. Well, that's hard to say. That means I'm getting older. Anyway, I attended college at Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama. Shout out Montgomery. And I returned home to Washington and took a job at a CPA firm where I put my accounting degree to work. And I traveled the world for 5 years, conducting audits and doing all things accounting, and decided to return to Alabama for law school. Now, I'll tell you that my decision to become a lawyer came very early. At 7 years old, I sat on the front porch of my parents' home, and as one of my older cousins quizzed me about what I wanted to do, I, without hesitation, told her, I want to be a lawyer. And maybe for you, the decision about what you want to do doesn't come quite so easy, but that's okay. Maybe today we'll plant a seed that will help you decide to join us in this illustrious profession. But at 7, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I don't really know how I knew that this is what I wanted to do because I didn't have any exposure to lawyers. I didn't know anyone in my family. I didn't have any family friends. or even the parents of any of my friends who were lawyers. It just felt right. And I knew this is what I wanted. So I want to help you hear a little bit about what this has looked like for me. And maybe one day you'll stand firmly planted on the front porch of someone's house and declare that you want to be a lawyer. But I'll tell you that careers in the law come in many facets. They look different. And hopefully today you're going to hear many ways that lawyers serve the community, and in many ways that we make being a lawyer work for us in career. Every lawyer doesn't work at a law firm. I will tell you that that's where my career began. When I left law school in 2008 and came to Huntsville, Alabama, I came to take a job at a law firm. And I stayed at that law firm for 10 years, where I did litigation work, mostly working employment litigation cases in federal court. And I love that work. It served me well. It taught me a lot. And I feel that I'm a better person, a better lawyer, a better manager because of the things that I learned as a litigation attorney. And then I made a decision to make a change. In 2018, I left the law firm and I went to work for a nonprofit organization. And in my nonprofit work, where I am now, my job is to keep the organization in line with the laws, rules, and regulations that govern us, and to assist my agency with its legal needs. And I do that and have been doing that now for almost 3 years. And I love this work as well. This work is most certainly and without question all about service, because my organization provides a vital service to the community in the way of healthcare for all. So what's the theme here? It's service. As a lawyer, what I've learned is that whether you work in corporate America, whether you're a government attorney, whether you're a litigation attorney in a law firm, or whether you're working in nonprofit, we are here to serve. And that has been my great pleasure in being a lawyer. The service aspect of this career has brought me a lot of satisfaction and joy. When I look around the Huntsville community and I know that I have clients that I've provided assistance to at maybe one of the most difficult or darkest moments of their life, career, or business cycle, and I know that something that I did has helped them continue to move in a good direction, it makes me very proud. And so I encourage you to consider careers in the law. There is, again, a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that you are rendering service to your community. Now, a couple of things that I will say about this career. There are often misunderstandings about what it takes to become a lawyer. And a lot of people believe you have to have a particular major or interest in order to go to law school. It's just not true. I was an accounting major, and many people think about political science, history, and English as majors that go to law school. But I went to law school having a business degree in my back pocket. And many of my friends who went to law school have degrees that range from English and history and political science to fine arts and math. You can be anything in college. You can study anything in college. Just do well. That's the important part. And doing well starts right now while you're in high school. But let me say this to those in the room who may look at their transcripts and say, it's not too late. You may have to take a different path to get there, but you can get there. And I encourage you to stay committed to your academics. And if you haven't been committed, get committed. And don't fret what's behind you. Think about what's ahead of you. I hope that today will encourage you to stay serious or get serious about your future, because the future can be as bright as the light you decide to shine on it. I was always a good student. I liked school. That's not everybody's story. And even with that story, even with that being my background, I made mistakes. I had hiccups along the way. But thankfully, I look back at those hiccups, those mistakes, those stumbling blocks, and I see them as the opportunities that they were for God to show me new direction, for me to pick up the pieces and keep going to the destiny that He had for me. And I have no regrets. And so I encourage you today, listen closely to the people who have taken time out of their very busy schedules to give you some nuggets of wisdom about what a career in the law could look like. And I pray that there will be many of you in the room who will decide that this is a career that's for you. Don't let the fact that you don't know any lawyers scare you from trying this. I didn't know any lawyers either, but I am here and I've been here for more than 10 years in this career and I love it. Thank you again for your time and your attention. I encourage you to stay awake. I know these video discussions can be kind of difficult. Stay awake and pay attention because there are some people who have some really important and great things to share with you. Thank you again to the Young Lawyers section of the Alabama State Bar. I wish you the best. Take care. Stay safe.
So welcome to the Minority Pre-Law Conference. Usually this takes place in person at the courthouse, and we do the mock trial segment of it where you guys get to see a full mock trial. But obviously our world looks a little different now, and so we're going to do this virtually and kind of show you guys some videos of today. It's going to be opening statements, and I have with me Gavin King. Gavin, if you'll introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey, my name is Gavin King. I practice law in Montgomery with my friend here, Ryan. I went to law school at Cumberland, went to undergrad at Mississippi State, and I'm a native of Opelika, Alabama.
And just so y'all know, I'm Ryan Duplishin. I'm a member of the executive committee of the Alabama Young Lawyers section. And Gavin's a member of the Young Lawyers section too. We've got about 800 members in the state. That's all just like the name sounds, young lawyers that are barred in Alabama. And we've been doing this conference for quite a while. And like I mentioned, it's a little different this year. So Gavin, what we're going to see today is an opening statement, and if you'll tell everybody kind of what an opening statement is.
Sure. As the name implies, an opening statement is a statement given by both sides of a case. In this case, the plaintiffs and defendants at the beginning of a trial. The purpose of an opening statement, really, from a lawyer's perspective, is to paint the picture of your story for the jury. Most critically, you're telling a story to the jury. Certainly there's going to be components like helping the jury to understand the law and helping the jury to understand the roadmap for what's going to happen during the course of a trial. But I would say most critically is getting your story, your version of the facts, so to speak, into the hearts and minds of the jury.
Gavin, so you mentioned an opening statement is kind of telling your side of the story. Could you kind of explain a little better, like what makes a good opening statement?
Sure. You can get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people to that question. But I think the thing that makes a good opening statement is to be credible, to be honest about your case, and also to make sure you are telling a story. A lot of times people want to get up and they want to sound very lawyerly and they want to sound super articulate. What's most important is that the people listening to you understand what you're saying. And so when I'm giving an opening statement, I try to avoid using really big words, and I try to take whatever the facts are of the case and create a captivating narrative, a story that people understand. We as humans just innately enjoy stories. And so if I can get the jury to hear the story, be captivated by it, and thereby believe it, then I think I've done my job.
My name is Gavin King, and I represent the defendant. Before we begin, I want to orient you to the courtroom. Directly in front of me is the jury box. To my front and left is the witness stand. To my left here is the bench. To my right and back will be defense counsel table. To my front and right will be prosecution counsel table.
Counsel for the defense, are you ready to give your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. This case is not really brought to you by the government. This case is brought to you by a con artist, a man who has conned mothers and fathers, who's conned universities, who's conned the government, and who will now try and con you into convicting an innocent man. That man's name is Mr. Mel Tam. My name is Gavin King, and I am honored to represent Mr. Tam. And we'll talk about him more in a moment. But before we do, I want to spend some time talking about the con artist who's brought you this case. His name is Spencer Matthew. Spencer Matthew cut his teeth as a telemarketer. From there, he progressed to the payday loan business. That was small potatoes. One year, his neighbor needed help getting their child into college. Spencer Matthew thought he could help. He fudged some paperwork, and lo and behold, the child was admitted. The neighbor was excited, and the neighbor paid Mr. Matthew a few $100. So Spencer Matthew thinks, these universities, they're easy to fool. And the parents, they'll do anything to get their children into college. And that is how the biggest con of Spencer Matthew's career was born. For a fee, he would promise parents to get their kids into college. And to make sure that they did, he would fudge some paperwork, bribe some university officials. This con grew and grew and grew. And it grew because it preyed on human nature, like all good cons. In this case, the desire for parents to help their children. And because this con grew and grew, the money began to pile in. Mr. Matthew, he didn't want to get the attention of the government. And so he set up a nonprofit corporation. And he claimed that this nonprofit corporation would help less fortunate kids get into college. But this nonprofit corporation was really just a shell. He would have his clients donate money to this corporation where he could collect the money and be free from government scrutiny. And on top of that, his clients, they got to feel like they were helping their children and less fortunate children. No need to tell the parents about this scam. In fact, it was dangerous to tell the parents. The fewer people that knew, the less trouble he could get in. That brings us to the Tams. Mr. Tam and his wife, Alex, live here. Mr. Tam is a well-known actor, and his wife is a businesswoman. They have one daughter named Jewel, and Jewel is the delight of their life. Jewel is a pretty smart young lady. She did well in school. She did okay on those standardized tests, but she's not a great test taker. And they heard about Spencer Matthew's services, and they thought, Spencer Matthew may be able to help. So they called him up. So he brings them right into his office and he tells them, I think we can get your daughter into college. But you're wealthy. You can afford my services. But there's so many less fortunate children who can't. would you consider making a donation to my nonprofit organization so that you can help other children get into college? The Tams were happy to do this. They wrote checks with their names front and center and handed those checks off to Mr. Matthew. They had no idea that Spencer Matthew was using their money to bribe university officials. But when they gave their money to Mr. Matthew, he got to work doing exactly what it is that he does to get kids into college. Later, the government found out about Spencer Matthew's scam. And they charged him with enough counts to sentence him to 800 years. And so Spencer Matthew came up with another con. A con to reduce his sentence. A con whose target this time was the government. Spencer Matthew would claim falsely that his clients were in on his scam. He dangled the name of a few of those famous clients in front of the government. And the government took that bait hook, line, and sinker. In exchange for his testimony against those clients, the government would recommend a sentence that would let him out in 9 years. Now, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. And there's something of an unwritten rule that people in my profession have. And that is that we never promise that our clients are going to take the witness stand. I'm going to break that rule today. And I'm going to promise you that Mel Tam is going to take this witness stand. And Mel Tam is going to tell you that he had no idea what Spencer Matthew was doing with his money. Now, up till this point, it may seem like we're going to tell our story, the government is going to tell their story, and you just have to determine which story is more likely to be true. But this is a criminal case in the United States of America. And in this country, that means that the government has the burden of proof. That burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. And the government has placed that burden in the hands of a man who's conned mothers and fathers, who's conned universities, who's conned the government, and today will try and con you. And so we ask that you end this con by returning a verdict of not guilty.
Gavin, so we just saw the opening statement that you gave in the trial competition, and I couldn't help but think that this story sounds familiar, something that's happened in the news lately. Could you tell everybody about that?
Sure. I didn't write the problem, but it seems like this was probably based on the college admission scandal that I'm sure you've heard about at this point. People of means, parents of means who certainly have an interest in getting their children into elite schools have kind of circumvented the system and used those means to get their children into college using the services of some unscrupulous people. So I think that was the basis of the problem that we were given.
And I know this trial was a while ago, but it seems like your defense, that you were defending the one of the parents, and that they somehow did not know what Rick Singer was doing with this money. I guess we're all curious now. Do you remember how they did not know I call him Rick Singer, but it's a fictitious name. Rick Singer's the real person, but how that they didn't know about where these payments were going.
Sure. So in the facts that I was given, Spencer Matthew, who owned this college admission business, had created a tax shell that was a nonprofit that was meant to fund educational opportunities for lower income students. And so when he had clients of means, he would have those clients donate to this tax shell, this nonprofit corporation, under the guise that he was going to use that money for those purposes. Instead, what he was doing is he was using that money to bribe university officials and to fudge numbers and what's most important about that is that the amount that these people were donating to the tax shell was very, very, very large. And the amount that they were donating, or the amount that they were paying for his services, was very small. So the idea was that it wouldn't look like anything was going on, just wealthy people doing something that wealthy people sometimes do, donating to nonprofit corporations.
And Gavin, I also noticed that you mentioned a cardinal rule of criminal defense attorneys not to put the defendant on the stand. And I think we see a lot of lawyer shows where defendants almost always go on the stand. So could you kind of explain that, why that is?
Yeah, I'm not a criminal defense lawyer, but it's very, very uncommon for a criminal defendant to take the stand. Without getting too complicated, there are just some things that a criminal defendant opens himself or herself up to if they choose to take the stand. And so when a criminal defendant is going to take the stand, which was the case in this trial, I felt like that was something that you should point out to a jury, that it's not normal for somebody to do this, and only under extraordinary circumstances does a criminal defendant take the stand to speak on their own behalf. And I would argue, most times that only happens when a criminal defendant really, really believes what they're saying is true and compelling, and also that what they have to say can't hurt them and they don't have anything to hide.
Exactly, because it's all about credibility, and those juries are definitely looking to see whether that person is lying or not, and that could usually determine their fate. Gavin, so we saw an opening statement. So kind of explain the phases of trial after an opening statement, kind of what goes next.
Sure. So both sides give an opening statement, and then the next thing that happens is the party that has the burden, so in a criminal case, that'll be the prosecution, puts on what's called their case in chief, and they call witnesses. And after they call those witnesses and they ask their own witnesses questions, each witness is then allowed to be cross-examined by the other side. And so one party calls their witnesses, they give a direct examination. Following their direct examination, there is a cross-examination by the other side, often to either try to show that this witness doesn't have credibility or that this witness is lying. And then oftentimes the party that called the witness then gets to redirect their witness. And in real trials, there could be redirect and recross until that witness is asked to be excused. And this goes on until the party that is putting on their case in chief feels that they have completed everything they need to do in order to prove their case, at which point they rest their case. You've probably heard that phrase before. So they rest their case. And at that point, oftentimes there are arguments about whether or not they've actually proved their case. And if a judge, which most often happens, says that a jury could find for them given what they've told the jury at this point, then the party that doesn't have the burden, so in this case a criminal defendant, would put on their case in chief. And that goes the same way as the prosecution's case in chief. Following that, there are closing statements where lawyers, kind of like in an opening statement, they make arguments. So in the opening statement, you're really not supposed to argue your case, you're just supposed to tell the story. In the closing argument, you get an opportunity to show how your story, the facts, and the law make it clear to you and should be to the jury, right, that your case is the truthful one and that they should find for you.
Yeah, and oftentimes in opening statements, especially in mock trials, right before the opening statement, the advocates will argue what's called motions in limine. Could you kind of explain what a motion in limine is and kind of the purpose behind it?
Sure. Motion in limine, obviously, it's not a phrase that we hear out in the world regularly. The best way to think of it is before a trial, there are certain things that both sides don't want juries to hear. It could be evidence for whatever reason. Maybe it's a rule of evidence or it's just unfair to their client. They don't want that to get in front of a jury. And so before a jury is brought in, the lawyers argue before a judge about what evidence should or should not be admitted. Oftentimes, if there's an argument before the judge, one side believes it shouldn't be in, the other side believes it should be in. And so based on the law, parties argue before a judge about whether or not that evidence should come in to the trial.
So the next video we're about to see is Faulkner Law's trial team, Faulkner's in Montgomery, and they went to what's called the Lone Star Classic, and this was the championship round. This took place in Texas, and the advocates in that one from Faulkner were Elliott Smith, who practices law in Nashville now, and Kia Scott, who practices law here in Montgomery. And Kia is going to do quite a bit of the motions in limine that we talked about earlier. She's going to do that first, and then what they call housekeeping matters, and then she's going to move into her opening statement.
Stay ready.
Yes, Judge. My name is Chandler Rain, and along with my co-counsel, Ms. Kira Kilday, we represent the state of Lone Star. And before we begin, Judge, we do have some housekeeping matters, as well as some motions to make outside the presence of the jury.
We'll take this up. Get the appearances. Get the defense ready.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Kia Scott, and today with my co-counsel, Elliott Smith, we are Team C, and we represent the defendant, Sean Appleby, in this case. We too have housekeeping matters and motions in limine whenever Your Honor is ready.
All right. We'll be seated, and we'll take up the state's motions first.
Yes, Judge. Just by way of giving you a little bit of background about this case, this is a murder case arising from an incident that occurred at the home of the victim, a man by the name of Mr. Tom Lawson. Mr. Lawson had a party at his home and had invited the members of his company over to the home. One of those members was the defendant, Mr. Sean Appleby. Another one of the partygoers was a man by the name of Drew Roberts. And Mr. Roberts is the focus of our first motion in limine. We anticipate that the defense is going to try and elicit testimony about Mr. Roberts' temper, or Mr. Roberts' propensity to get into arguments, as well as his employment history and being fired from a previous job. This particular type of evidence is improper character evidence under Rule 404, as it doesn't go to show this witness's character for truthfulness or untruthfulness, only this witness's character to have a bad temper. And because of that, it should be inadmissible.
Bunt.
Your Honor, the defense does not plan to use his previous termination in this case, so we do not have a problem with that being excluded.
So what do you ask the court to do?
Your Honor, you may grant the motion in limine.
I'll grant your motion.
And second, Judge, there's an individual by the name of Ted Nasters who was not one of these partygoers. We anticipate that the defense is going to try and elicit testimony about Mr. Nasters' work history as well. Mr. Nasters was a police officer with the Dallas Police Department and was terminated from that job for police brutality. This also is improper character evidence under Rule 404, as it doesn't, again, go to show his character for truthfulness or untruthfulness, only his propensity to commit a violent act. And because of that, it should be inadmissible.
Your Honor, again, we will be mentioning Ted Nasters, but we will not be discussing his previous termination. So we do not have a problem with that being admitted or the court granting the motion.
Grant.
And nothing further from the state, Judge.
Thank you. Counsel, you had motion.
At this time, Your Honor, would you like to do your housekeeping, or would you like to take up motions in limine for the defense?
Your Honor, at this time we have two motions in limine. The first is we believe the evidence in this case will show that there was an FBI investigation into DigiWorks Company, which is the company that Sean Appleby works for, as well as the deceased in this case. We believe that evidence will come through emails or testimony on behalf of the detective in this case, and we ask that the court exclude any mention to this investigation under 403. It's inadmissible because it would be highly prejudicial for the jury to hear this, anything about this investigation. There have been no crimes charged, no federal crimes have been mentioned to be brought against the defendant, and furthermore, Your Honor, the investigation is not even an ongoing investigation. Also, it would be confusing to the jury to hear of this investigation.
So you want any evidence or mention of what was essentially a preceding and almost parallel investigation by the FBI to be excluded?
Yes, Your Honor, that is correct.
Or at least not offered into evidence without prior ruling from the court at that time.
Your Honor, we would ask that the court rule on this in motions in limine that it be excluded. But if you choose to reserve your ruling, we would ask that they be prohibited from using it in opening statements.
Vance?
Judge, the prejudicial value that comes from the emails and the investigation is farly outweighed by the probative value here. It's part of the state's theory that the defendant saw these emails and learned about the investigation, and that went to the motive of the defendant on the night of July 4th. And because of that motive, its probative value is farly outweighs the prejudicial value of these emails and the investigation, so it should be admitted.
Yeah, I'm going to grant the motion in limine, but it's qualified. It's not a final ruling. We'll hear the evidence, and I'll look at where we are in the trial and the context at that time. Relevant evidence to the murder, it can be very high prejudicial, depending on what we mean by prejudicial, of course. I would think the state always hopes that its evidence is prejudicial in the relevant sense, but we can make that judgment at that time. But let's not go into it without bringing it up again. And so my ruling is that the limine motion is granted, but subject to reconsideration at the appropriate time when you get to that point.
Certainly, Judge.
All right. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. We have one more motion in limine. We would like the court to exclude any use of the term murder weapon. Your Honor, we have not conceded that a murder took place in this case. It is our theory that an accident was just as likely. Furthermore, it'd be highly prejudicial for the jury to hear it referred to as a murder weapon. As Your Honor, that is a fact that is still in dispute.
Judge, the term murder goes directly to the charge in this case. The word murder weapon is going to allow all of the witnesses, specifically the detective, the lead detective in this particular case, to identify which weapon was used in this crime that he investigated. And so the term murder weapon will allow the jury actually to be able to understand the difference between items that were found and tagged and the actual murder weapon. So this would be relevant under 404.
I'll deny the motion. I think the jury understands that the characterization of this particular piece of equipment, which I understand is a device for lifting the leaves out of a pool, they'll understand that characterization is the state's characterization. So I don't think that's necessary to try to exclude that, draw that line so thin. So I'll deny that motion.
Yes, Your Honor. That will conclude our motions in limine. My co-counsel, Kia Scott, does have a few housekeeping matters before we get started whenever Your Honor is ready.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
First, Your Honor, just a few items of efficiency before we begin today's trial. May we assume that all witnesses have been pre-sworn?
I'm sorry?
May we assume that all witnesses have been pre-sworn, Your Honor?
Yes.
Also, Your Honor, can we constructively invoke the rule of witness sequestration for all parties except for the defendant today?
Objection to that? Take none?
No objection to that, Judge.
You may.
May we also assume that all sidebars are constructive today, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, also, would you like us to ask the first time or every time before approaching a witness?
No, I think you can approach the witness in the natural order of things. If you abuse the practice, I'll let you know.
Also, Your Honor, would you like to see any exhibits before they are handed to the witness today?
Not necessary.
Your Honor, would you like us to ask the first time or every time before having to approach the bench?
You need not, if you'll ask before you approach the bench at any time, but it's not, I would think that it will not be necessary to do so ordinarily.
Also, Your Honor, would you like to see any demonstratives as they are presented to the jury today?
No.
Can counsel move freely about the well during speeches and examinations today?
Yes.
Now, Your Honor, we would like to clarify a few things that we've stipulated with opposing counsel. We will be using an enlargement today. We've shown opposing counsel this enlargement, and they have agreed that it is what it purports to be. Also, Your Honor, we would just like to remind the court that pursuant to the local rules, we are required to call the defendant to the stand today. And also, Your Honor, we would like to remind the court that we are operating under the federal rules of evidence and the federal rules of criminal procedure. And we would like to ask court permission to refer to the rules of this competition as the local rules. That concludes all of our housekeeping matters for at this time, Your Honor, and we're ready to proceed when the court is ready.
One thing to all counsel, keep your voice up and I'll promise to do the same. I will also tell you to speak slowly, that is not rapidly. If you can manage that, it will be very helpful to me, if not to the jury. I've found that these courtrooms lose their acoustical power each year. So you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Stage ready for opening statements.
You may.
May please court. Lying, backstabbing, snitch. Those are the words of that man, Sean Appleby, a man so filled with resentment and rage, he got his revenge by picking up an 8-foot-long metal pole and cracking it over the neck of his friend and colleague, murdering him. Members of the jury, my name is Kira Kilday, and along with my co-counsel, Chandler Rain, we have the honor of representing the state of Lone Star against Sean Appleby. We have charged him with the offense of murder. Every day, the defendant would arrive to work at DigiWorks where he's second in charge. He works for his friend, someone he's known since high school, and someone who turned out to be the victim in today's case. The victim had founded the company about 5 years ago, but the defendant feels like it's his idea. He's not getting credit for it. Regardless, the victim got to be the boss, and the defendant resents him for it. On the 4th of July, the victim hosts his annual 4th of July barbecue, and everybody from the company's there. There's the marketing director, Drew Roberts, the bookkeeper, Bobby Vasquez, the defendant, and the victim. The evening was fine, good eats, good drinks, good visits. But the evidence will show that at some point, the defendant goes inside the victim's house. He stays in there for 20 minutes alone. And when he comes back out, he's different. He's changed. Something in that house caused all those years of resentment to morph into rage. He starts arguing with the victim, and he waits for everyone else at the party to leave. And now, he will get his revenge. The defendant tows his way over to the side of the house where the victim keeps his pool cleaning equipment. He bends down to pick up one of those pool cleaning poles, and he tows his way over, creeps up behind the victim who has his back turned. He cocks the pool pole back, and he swings as hard as he can. Years of resentment, years of being second best, rage, all released in one swing of a pool stick. A swing hard enough to fracture the back of the victim's neck. Hard enough to knock the victim unconscious into the pool with a splash. Members of the jury, today, we as the state have the burden of proving to you beyond a reasonable doubt that that defendant intentionally and knowingly took the life of the victim, Tom Lawson, in this case. Now, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is not proof beyond any and all doubt. It's just when the evidence leaves you firmly convinced. And at the end of this trial today, my co-counsel, Mr. Rain's going to come up here and spell it out for you using the evidence and testimony you will hear today. Now, you're going to hear from someone who was at that party, the marketing director, Drew Roberts. Now, Drew Roberts also went to high school with the victim and the defendant, so he'll be able to tell you just how much the defendant resented the victim for the lack of credit he got at the company. And he was also at that party on the 4th of July, so he'll be able to tell you how the defendant was fine, how he was calm, but then he went inside the house, and when he came back, he was different. He was in a foul mood, and he started arguing with the victim. Drew Roberts, ready to go, left, leaving only the defendant alone with the victim. Now, you're also going to hear from the lead investigator in this case, Detective Stacy Wortham. Detective Wortham's going to describe for you the scene as he originally found it, diagrammed it, photographed it, the evidence he collected from that pool cleaning pole, the defendant's fingerprints found on it. But he'll also be able to tell you about the defendant's rage, how he interviewed the defendant twice. And on that second time, the defendant was fine, he was calm, but then at some point, he changed. He went from calling the victim his brother to saying he could rot in hell because he was a lying, backstabbing snitch. So that's why, at the end of this trial and after the conclusion of all the evidence and testimony today, I'm confident you will know that you will be firmly convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that that defendant should be found guilty of murder. Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense would ask for a brief moment to set up the courtroom. Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed. May it please the court. Opposing counsel. $11 p.m. to 8 a.m. Unexplained, unaccounted for, unknown. 9 hours unexplained. That's 540 minutes unaccounted for. 32,000 seconds of unknown. Members of the jury, that is too much unknown time to convict Sean Appleby for this crime. Good afternoon. My name is Kia Scott, and today, along with my co-counsel, Elliott Smith, we have the privilege of representing Sean Appleby. I'd like to take just a minute to introduce you to Sean Appleby. Just inform me. This is Sean Appleby. He's a longtime resident of Bexar County. He grew up and graduated right here in Lone Star. And after finishing college, after receiving a phone, he started a career after finishing college, but after receiving a phone call, he left the only career he knew and started a company with his best friend, Tom Lawson. Now, without even having the opportunity to grieve the loss of his best friend, Sean Appleby is being dragged into court, accused of murder by the prosecution. But in the state of Lone Star, the prosecution can't just accuse a person of murder. They've got to prove it. And as the prosecution has told you today, they do bear the burden. They not only have to prove it, but they must prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Let me tell you, that's a high burden. It's the highest burden in our American justice system, and it should be if the prosecution wants to take a man's freedom away. Beyond a reasonable doubt. That simply means that at the close of today's trial, if there are questions or there are holes, there are possibilities, and the prosecution has yet to explain those possibilities, answer those questions, or fill those holes, members of the jury, that is reasonable doubt. Now, I want to tell you something because this is important. At this moment, as it stands, Sean Appleby is presumed innocent until the prosecution can prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So, what does that mean exactly? Let me give you an example. That means that if we were to stop this trial right here, right now, you'd have no choice but to return a verdict in his favor, because at this moment, Sean Appleby is cloaked in a presumption of innocence. And at the close of today's trial, you'll see that the prosecution won't be able to meet its burden. The prosecution won't even be able to touch that cloak because Sean Appleby is innocent. He did not commit any crime. Now, the evidence today will show you 4 things. The first thing that the evidence will show is that Sean Appleby attended a 4th of July barbecue at his best friend's home. You'll hear from Bobby Vasquez that the food was grilling, the drinks were flowing, and everybody had a great time. You'll hear from Sean Appleby that after he left that party at 11 o'clock p.m., he went home, had a good night's rest, and when he woke the next morning, he received the news that his best friend had passed away in the night. Now, as the prosecution mentioned, Sean Appleby was not the only party goer that day. There were 3 other attendees at the party. Those partygoers included Tom Lawson, Drew Roberts, and Bobby Vasquez. But you see, no one would have been surprised to see these 4 together. They were great friends, grew up and graduated together. And as the prosecution pointed out, they started a business together, DigiWorks Incorporated. Each of them had a different function in management at the company. Tom Lawson functioned as CEO. Now, Sean Appleby was CFO of that company. Drew Roberts Drew Roberts was head of marketing. And Bobby Vasquez kept the books. Now, the second thing that the evidence will show you today is that everyone at that party had the same opportunity and means to hurt Tom Lawson that day. The third thing that the evidence will show you today, you haven't heard. You see, the prosecution just came before you and told you a really good, exciting story. But what the prosecution didn't tell you is that there was possibly a 5th person at the party that night. His identity has been confirmed through DNA evidence. Today, we know him to be Ted Nasters. And you'll learn when Detective Wortham takes this stand today that Ted Nasters sat outside the Lawson house for hours the night of that barbecue. You see, what took place when Ted Nasters went into the backyard of Tom Lawson's house? We don't know, because the prosecution knows that the lead detective on this case has yet to be able to question him because they can't locate him, can't find him. And that's important. Now, the 4th thing that the evidence will show you today is that the night of that 4th of July party, Tom Lawson had a blood alcohol level of a 0.19. And members of the jury, that is double the legal limit. And despite knowing this, the lead investigator never checked the possibility of an accident. So, members of the jury, whether or not Tom Lawson slipped, hit his head, and fell in his pool, accidentally causing his own death? That information, it's unaccounted for. And whether or not any of the other party goers that night had anything to do with Tom Lawson's death, it's unexplained. And what happened when Ted Nasters entered Tom Lawson's backyard after all the partygoers left? Members of the jury, it's unknown. No one who takes this stand today will be able to conclusively tell you what happened to Tom Lawson from 11 o'clock p.m. when the last partygoer left his home and 8 o'clock a.m. when his body was found the next morning. That's 9 hours unexplained, 540 minutes unaccounted for, 32,000 seconds of unknown. Members of the jury, that is too much unknown time to convict Sean Appleby for this crime. And that is why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Elliott Smith, he'll come back before you today and ask you to return a verdict of not guilty. At this time, Your Honor, we would ask to preserve the board for closing statements.
Would the bench like to see the demonstrative evidence?
The Lone Star Classic is hosted by a law school in San Antonio or in the San Antonio area. And I believe the beginning rounds are at their law school, but when you reach the final rounds, they take you to their historic courthouse there in Bexar County, Texas.
And we heard a couple words in Kia's opening statement that we heard a lot. Unknown, unexplained, and unaccounted for. What did those words, what did that stick out in your mind? Like, what was she trying to do there?
That is an example of a great theme. We've talked about storytelling, but one of the things that any opening statement and any trial lawyer wants to do is to create themes that are recurring in the minds of a jury. And so that theme right there is something that you remember well, having heard it. I remember it, and I imagine in a course of a trial, she and her co-counsel are going to continue to use that theme. And so it's very, very important that juries kind of internalize your story and can remember it based on just that theme. We all know themes from famous trials, right? If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. That's another example of a well-known theme that helps juries internalize your story and oftentimes can be the difference between what story they believe and which one they don't.
And Gavin, we also saw Kia use what we call demonstrative, was the board that she was writing on. Did that or did anything else stick out in your mind as far as what she did well?
I thought the board was really good. Another thing that helps juries is visualization. You know, oftentimes we're just kind of talking heads using words, but getting an opportunity to put something in front of a jury to make it real to them, or to at least have something for them to look at throughout the entirety of your presentation is helpful. Something else that I thought she did really well is she said, look, you're going to see 4 things today, and those 4 things are what's going to tip this case in our favor. And assuming that she showed them those 4 things, that does a couple things. 1, it gives a jury something to look for. And 2, it gives her credibility with the jury, because the jury is going to say, she told me she would show me 4 things. She showed me 4 things. She must be an honest person.
Gavin, we've talked about credibility and being authentic, and sometimes, I mean, we all know we all have very different personalities. Some of us are not the charismatic type that gets out there and is really loud. And sometimes we see in mock trials that some of these students try to imitate that. And what would you say? How important is it to be yourself, or should you try to be that other charismatic person, even if that's not really your personality?
I think it's important that you be the best version of yourself when you're trying a case in front of a jury. And so there may be things in your own character that you may need to improve upon or to sharpen. But at the end of the day, juries are going to see through you if you're putting on a facade. And so you want to be you. You want to be authentic, because if you're not, in my limited experience, juries, they can see right through that. And oftentimes they can tell that you're not being honest with them. And that cuts right back to the credibility that we've talked about. If you don't have credibility with a jury, you don't have anything. Something I heard recently that I thought was really, really critical, and I'm still thinking about it, is that credibility is earned in drops, but it's lost in gallons. And so you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to maintain credibility.